weight. We became very streamlined. But the problem was, and this is sort of the backup plan was, we were just going to have to expand and grow a lot slower.
Yeah.
That's what was going to happen. So if we wouldn't have met Good Partners, who's out of New York, great guys, if we wouldn't have met them, we would have done plan B, and we would have, made some adjustments, and it would have been a slower growth. And the problem with that for me is the same thing that I told the team at Jocko Fuel yesterday. At Echelon Front, we go and we go to the muster. And at the muster, we'll have scores of people come up to every team member, to JP, to Leif, to me, to Dave, to everybody. An individual will come up and say, I got my business back. We were about to go bankrupt. We recovered everything. We're hiring now. Or, I was about to get divorced, and my wife and I are back together, and I lost 58 pounds, and just all these incredible stories that you hear. And it sounds great, but every muster debrief, what I tell the team is, hey, great job with this small number of people that we helped with these principles. And there are literally millions and millions of people that need these principles to help them in their life. And we're not reaching them right now, so we're not doing what we should be doing. And it's the same thing with Jocko Fuel. Right now, as you and I are sitting here talking, there's a 22-year-old kid that's drinking an energy drink that's absolutely horrible for him. That's what's happening. There's another 7-year-old kid that's drinking a chocolate milk that's filled with high fructose corn syrup, and it's absolutely horrible for him. And his mom doesn't know. His mom doesn't know what's available. So that's the issue. So as in my own mind, I had the part of my brain saying, hey, hang on, we can hang on. And the other part of my brain saying, who are we hurting? And the compromise is, okay, how about, and what we eventually did is a minority share. We sold a minority share, brought in great partners that have some great brands. I mean, they've built and run some great companies. Yeah. I mean, just outstanding. So that made it that was nice. It was like at the end of wrestling season, where all of a sudden we didn't have to cut weight every Wednesday and Saturday.
Yes,
because we have some room.
I definitely saw the relief on the finance team. Don got to sit back in his chair for about 5 minutes and go, because being that lean and running just-in-time inventory, and at one point, Joe Maas, our chief revenue officer, said, man, we're running this company with like 9 people and 3 bald dudes. Yeah. It's, me, Joe, and Brian there, whatever. And you're looking at our growth rate and our trajectory, and it's like, damn, Joe, like that's funny, but it's right. And you know what? Running the business like you're on a desert island is going to allow you you would think now you're going to be a good steward of that investment. And I was talking to you about as far as like living into the brand, like after that investment came on, I felt again that same kind of like when back in the day when remortgaging the house for Origin, I felt the same thing. Like, man, some of our family and friends invested in this with us alongside of us.
All my family and friends.
All your family and friends. Yeah.
Everyone I know.
Yeah, and
that's a broad statement, but like a lot of people that are very close to me are in the game with us.
And I think that's important that like this new partner allowed us to bring our family and friends into. I mean, my childhood friend I've known since I was 12 years old invested in this thing. You know what I mean? It's like, man, I better be a good steward of this and like I said, live into it. You know what I mean? And you were like, what is live into it? Like, well, I haven't been. You know what I mean? I like them cookies and that ice cream. But
how well have you been quote living into it this week, dude? You're up here. I've seen you consume more cookies, brownies. What is going on, dude?
I've been living into that jiu-jitsu immersion, that late night cold cut combo snack.
Just getting it in there, dude.
But I mean, like as far as understanding the psyche of the consumer, of the people out there, because I believe right now. And if you look at America, I think we're the strongest and healthiest we've ever been, and I think we're the most unhealthy and most out of shape.
You're talking about America at large. The people of America
and it's probably a worldwide thing too, but there's some strong people.
Oh, hell yeah.
Strongest we've ever been.
100%.
And healthiest we've ever been.
Beasts.
And then the heaviest and the most unhealthy. And people dying of all sorts of shit. And there's this freaking gap, you know, and yeah, you can point the finger, but the finger goes in a lot of different directions. You got to have a lot of finger pointing. The fact of the matter is we're trying to fill the void between the two, you know, and educate people in a different way. And, you know, and Jocko Fuel as a mission, as a movement, and the things we're doing, it's no different than the Origin side, you know. Origin built to believe in the dream, built to believe in resurrection of America's factories and communities and the reclamation.
This is Jocko Podcast. Don't do it.
So it's kind of a little balancing act game within the game kind of a thing.
100%.
Yeah, because if you just be rigid, or this is what it seems like anyway, if you just be rigid to the, hey, I'm always going to delegate, and then it's when it comes to, you know, I'm going to, trash needs to be taken out.
Yeah.
I got an extra 3 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
No, I'm sticking to the rule. Delegate, you know, kind of a thing.
No. Things that suck, try not to delegate.
Yeah.
And look, that could also mean if you're the platoon commander, guess what you're doing all day? Cleaning the toilets, picking up brass. Like you could assign yourself every task that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do that. So we have to put that into the calculus. We don't just delegate things that suck. In fact, you know, Leif tells a story. We were going through our dive portion of training. And diving kind of sucks. You know, it's cold, wet, miserable, long, boring. And some people think. And so a lot of guys, given the opportunity, they have meetings to attend during dive. They have reports to write.
Yeah.
And Leif and Seth, you know, they were kind of like surprised. Here I am, got my wetsuit on, got my fins out, we're ready to go dive, ready to go spend 4 hours turtlebacking around San Diego Bay and freaking 3 hours on bag in the darkness, you know, bored out of your mind. But that's what you do. So that's one of those things where if it sucks, use caution while delegating. Make sense?
Fully. It's the kind of more of the approach to it, right? Where it's like you got to understand the overall picture of what are you doing here, you know, and why are you doing it, kind of a thing. So if you have more important things to do, you delegate these things. They're all important because they're all pieces of the puzzle,
right?
But there's another, like I said, game kind of going on where you want to be looking out for everyone in that little additional way, you know, and you're gonna sacrifice little parts of kind of yourself.
Yep.
To kind of do it.
So we've kind of got the 4 laws of combat covered. The next thing I'm going to think about, and this is a big one, is making sure that our ego is not driving this decision, which you would be shocked and dismayed at the number of decisions that are driven by ego. Driven by ego. They're almost 100% in some cases driven by ego. Am I making this decision based on my ego? Am I imposing it as punishment, subconscious punishment on someone who questioned me? Am I forcing this to prove, to echo that my plan was the better plan? So you have to be extremely cautious of that. And the thing that we have to be careful of is that our ego can absolutely, or not even, your ego is going to lie to you. That's what our ego does. Our ego is going to lie to us. And so and if it's tricky too. Your ego's smart. Your ego's, it's like the devil. You ever seen the movie The Exorcist?
Yes.
So in the movie The Exorcist, the devil knows the things to say to the priest that's gonna get him. Yeah. And your ego is equally smart as the devil. Mm-hmm. And it knows, my ego's like, hey Jocko, Hey, I know, I get extreme ownership. I buy into extreme ownership 100%. But this time, is actually really is Echo's fault. Echo's plan's really not as good as yours. I get it. I know you want to be humble, but hey, if you're humble now, it's actually going to cost you in the long. That's the way your ego talks to you. It's like a little savage in there, just manipulating. So you got to be very careful of that. The other thing that happens is, if your ego's running the decision, have you listened to anybody else? Have you listened to other people with an open mind? Do you have an open mind? So be careful of that, because sometimes we're listening but we're not hearing. And then a good little sanity check. Am I doing this? Am I using this decision? Am I driving this decision with my rank, with my position, even with my experience? And let me explain what that sounds like. The idea of driving, it sounds good, right? It sounds good for me to say, hey, I'm more experienced. That's why I'm making this decision.
Yeah.
But that's the equivalent as, dude, I've been doing this for 20 years. You need to shut up and listen to me.
Yeah.
Any of those things. If the main driver of your decision and the way you're convincing people is through experience or through rank or through position or authority, you already lost. You already, let me not say you lost, but you need to reconsider what's happening. Because if I can't articulate to you, Echo Charles, why I made this decision without saying because I outrank you or because I'm in charge of this or because I've done this type of thing 20 times, if I have to go there, that means I can't articulate why we're going with my plan. And that's a problem. And the problem most likely is my ego. So use caution on that. And right tied up next to that is emotion. Am I making an emotional decision? I mean, what a smart little thing to check on. And if you check on it, you're going to realize that it's a bad move. People make emotional decisions all the time. And by the way, they almost never turn out good. Am I mad? Am I frustrated? Am I vengeful? Am I fearful? Am I guilty? Guilt is an emotion that'll make you do something that you know you shouldn't do. Fear is an emotion that'll make you do something that you shouldn't do. Frustration. I'm getting frustrated. You know what? Just go ahead and do it, right? These are horrible things. So check with yourself and make sure that your emotions are not driving the decision. Now listen, here's the other thing. Here's the dichotomy. Is your emotions do still have to be part of the calculus. They got to be part of the calculus. You got to calculate your own emotions to get the answer. You got to calculate the emotions of the team to get the answer. Because if the team is all mad about doing this thing, and I say, you know what though, logically we should do it. All right, guys, this is the logical answer. Go do it. And all it does is make everyone madder. First of all, are you going to execute well? Are you going to do a good job? Are you trustworthy while you're out there and you're mad? What did it do to my leadership capital? There's all these problems it's going to cause. All these problems it's going to cause. So I have to put emotions into the calculus, but it can't be the overwhelming driver of my decision making. It has to be a component, but it should be a small component in most cases. Meaning, if I know that making some decision is going to make the entire team totally irate, I need to weight it a little bit more because the emotion's stronger. But you have to calculate it. And if you're not aware of it, if you're not paying attention to it, then it's not gonna work out the way you want it to. It's gonna actually cause bad decisions. Next one, perspective. Perspective. People throw this around. Oh, what? Make sure you know what other people's perspectives is. But they only throw it around when they think about it. But a lot of times we get locked into our perspective, and that's bad. I want to see as many different perspectives on a subject, on a topic, on an idea that I can. I want to know my peers' perspectives. I want to know my subordinates' perspectives. I want to know my superiors' perspectives. I want to know my competitors or my enemies' perspective. What are they actually seeing right now? The more angles I see of a target or of a problem, the better I can understand it. And the better I can understand it, the better off I'm going to be. We have this thing when you do a reconnaissance of a target, a building or a compound. When you do it, what you try and do is you try and move around the entire perimeter over a period of time. You try and see it from every different possible angle. Mm-hmm. If you don't see something from every possible angle, there's something that you're missing. And that thing that you're missing could be a critical component of the target or of the problem. So by asking your subordinates, hey, what does this look like to you? By asking your peers, like, hey, what do you see here? By asking your boss, hey, what does it look like from your perspective? By doing that, it's going to give you a better understanding of the target, of the problem, of the issue, and then you can better formulate a plan. And by the way, my default mode is to take, when someone else says, hey, Jocko, I see a solution, my default mode is to try and utilize their solution, try and utilize their plan, try and utilize their idea. That's my default mode. Now, if there's a leadership vacuum, and I wrote about this in Leadership Strategy Tactics Field Manual, if there's a vacuum, no one's making a decision, sure, I'm going to step in. I'm going to give you some little hints here. When there's a leadership vacuum, I'm going to let that leadership vacuum develop it a little bit extra, just a little bit extra. I'm going to let that void, let the presence of that silence, of that non-direction, of that lack of leadership, I'm going to let it sit there for an extra second, 2 seconds. Why am I doing that? Because I want everyone to know that there's a leadership void. And it doesn't take long. It takes a second, takes 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And all of a sudden, everyone goes, oh. And when everyone knows there's a leadership void, everyone is primed to execute. Everyone is ready to receive orders. So if there's a leadership void, I'm going to make sure everyone can feel it. By the way, those extra 2-3 seconds, I'm actually confirming the plan in my head that I've formulated. So now my plan is going to be 2 or 3 seconds further developed and better. And then I make the call. And yes, I'm going to make a small call, an iterative decision. And if someone else happens to make a call at the same time, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to support their call. Because that's my default mode. My default mode is to support someone else's call. Because that is the easiest way to move forward with a plan. The easiest way to move forward with a plan isn't with Echo has a plan and I have a plan to try and convince Echo that my plan is better. The easiest way, the quickest way to move is to say, Echo, sounds good. I'm on board. What do you want me to do? How can I support? Unless Echo's plan is freaking, horrible. Actually, let me rephrase that in a more distinct way. Unless Echo's plan is unviable. It's an unviable plan that will not work. If it's a minimally viable plan, if it's, it'll get the job done. You have a minimally viable plan and I have a viable plan, so that means mine might be a little bit better. But now I have to convince you of that. I have to explain why. And by the way, when I say I'm going to support your plan, I can probably bring some additional viability to your plan that can make your plan better than mine was in the first place. So that's what I'm going to do. That's the easiest way to do it. Now, what do we need to think about here is we need to think about the fact that we almost all, here's a bias, that almost all of us have the same bias, which is my idea is the best idea. That's our general consideration as humans, that my idea is the best idea. So know that you have that bias. I actually go hard against that bias. And quite frankly, sometimes I go too hard against that bias. Sometimes someone's got a plan, I'm like, eh. And it might be really minimally viable. Shit. And I'll be like, you know what, we'll go with it. Sometimes I do that a little bit too much. So I know that.
Why do you think you do that?
I just want to be supportive. Don't want to be a imposing tyrant on the team. And generally, I'm like thinking to myself, well, my plan's good, but we can probably make Echo's plan work. I would rather do it. Look, why? I'll tell you why. I literally believe what I'm saying right now. It's usually easier for me just to support your plan than it is for me to convince you of this other plan and explain it to you. I can uptake your plan pretty quick. I get it. Cool. Let's go execute that thing. I'm supporting you. Let's run with it. Yeah. And then I'm detached from your plan so I can see a little bit more. When it's my plan, all of a sudden I gotta manage that whole thing, and I'm staring right into it. And I don't know how good you are at being detached and trying to adjust things. You might not be as good as me. So you know what? I'm gonna let you. Detachment is a harder skill than than the planning and execution. Or it's a rarer skill. If I tell you to go and execute something, there's a good chance you'll be able to do it. If I tell you, hey, I'm going to go execute, you detach and sit on the outside and try and give me some broad guidance about how I can do better. That's a harder job because most of the time you'll be like, I'm starting to execute my plan. You're going to jump in there with me. You're going to start doing it too. So that's why I sort of over-index on allowing, on providing support or allowing people to do things that maybe I don't 100% agree with, right? I mean, you've done some stuff where I've been like, well, that didn't seem to be the best idea, was it? And we can look back post-mortem.
Is this a Christmas music thing?
Christmas music, that's a good one, right?
All right.
You know?
Sure.
Some things happen, you're like, well, that's not good. That's not what we were looking for at all. Didn't you say you didn't even know that was a Christmas song?
Yeah, that's correct.
Bruh.
I know. Not bruh, I don't know. Sorry. I do now, though, so, you know.
You got to watch out for that one. So, that's the deal. It's perspective. You have to actually pull yourself back and try and see other people's perspectives. And the best way to do that is by talking to them, asking them good questions.
Halo Reach. This is the newest version.
A freaking, what's the word?
How's it going, man? How have you been?
That I can see what Echo sees. I don't go into a meditative state and go into your brain. No, I go, hey Echo, what does that look like to you? This isn't freaking
remote viewing.
Yeah, this isn't remote viewing. This isn't remote viewing. What's the deal with remote? You think it's true?
I don't know.
They had big programs with it in the military. There's a movie about it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. If it is true, I don't know how it works at all. It doesn't seem.
Could be you guys
good.
are really good at guessing.
Yeah.
Maybe. You know. Well, a lot of the
Annoying roommates can definitely be a pain. Going to Japan, hell yeah. You getting stationed over there? I'm doing great. Doing great, man. I got accepted to Boston, and I'm starting school next week for my first quarter. So UDP, right on. Nice. Yeah, no, I'm doing great. Just working until school starts, and yeah. Yeah. So still doing music and stuff, and yeah. So hopefully the core isn't kicking your ass too much. Hope you're doing okay. Minus the roommates and stuff. Keep on grinding, hell yeah. Yeah. It's good. Well, that's exciting, man. Enjoy Japan. Japan's really great. Are you Saspo? You going to Saspo, or you don't have to say the specifics, right? But yeah. Tokyo area, Iwakuni, right on. Iwakuni's dope, I hear. Nice. Well, have fun. Japan is a great place. Even though I only went once for 2 weeks, it was very peaceful there, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. So, yeah, enjoy it, man.
What do you call, like, the psychic, mediums and mind readers and stuff? Yeah. That's, as it turns out, from what I understand, is what it is. It's like, it's not guessing,
Pokemon
but
Center?
it's like
hell yeah, sounds
guessing
fun.
about, like, they react to cues with you, like how you respond. So it's like, I'm seeing red, and then if they do something, they're like, okay, red is something, Do you know a person name? And they go real basic names.
Look at the you get to take a look at the Greninja statue if there is one. What games this is? This is Killing Floor 2. It's a game I always love to play because it's quite relaxing, minus the chaos, and it's a good game to listen to audiobooks to, podcasts, new music, and like I said, it's kind of a stress reliever too, because you don't really think, you just shoot and you kill things, and there's an objective, but it's not a terribly intense or thought-provoking objective. It's reach the end or weld something sometimes based on the map. Yeah, that's why I like this game a lot. Highly recommended it. It came out in 2016, and it's still one of my favorite games for sure. Made by the same people as Rising Storm 2. Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's sick. Rising Storm 2 was pretty fun too. That game probably also you could do that as well. unlike Squad for sure, that seems like it's more tactical and you have to actually use teamwork and seems more intense. Squad seems more intense for sure than when compared to Rising Storm 2, for sure. Yeah. Animations look the same? Yeah, they're pretty similar. Graphics, animations. Yeah. I'm this game.
Verse, and so because I'm feeling a John or a Jim,
Yeah.
or like that.
In this game, I got you.
Even broader is like, do you know anyone?
Probably,
that's, do you know
if
anyone
it's the
that's
same
experienced
company and
trouble in their
whatnot,
life right
yeah.
now? And
Oh,
if I
yeah.
see you like, then I'm like, wait, are they sick? You know what I mean?
And
all
at
of a
the same time, my mind is awake. Do I? Then I search for everyone in my whole. It's like whether it's significant or not, you kind of make
You
it.
too,
to me,
bro.
So it's like
Thanks for checking in. It's we should definitely hang out sometime. Like play with Zed'S or play games just you and I sometime. That'd be pretty fun. Sleep well and have a good one, bro.
What's going on?
Maybe we'll have a remote viewer on the program because the military had like a remote viewer group.
Yeah.
People that's what they did: sit in a room and go into a meditative state and look for, missile launch pads, stuff like this.
I guess the argument for and against it, in a matter of speaking, is kind of the same thing. Where it's like your brain is so complex, and there's a lot of stuff about your brain and all this stuff that we don't know. So it's possible, but at the same time, it's kind of like, all right, well, I don't see how your eyes can like see something that they don't see, and it's your brain. It doesn't make sense. Given what we do know, it doesn't make sense.
Eddie Bravo has a podcast now, and it's called Look Into It. I think it's called Look Into It, which is a freaking great name. And this makes me think, maybe we need to get Eddie Bravo to look into it and see what's up. See what's up with remote viewing. Because he's looking into a bunch of stuff.
Oh,
right?
yeah. You know why it's called Look Into It?
I think it's because of what I just said. Is there another reason?
Yeah, well, that's a thing that there was a
is it a meme?
kind of that he was on a podcast. I forget which one it was, but it was one of Joe Rogan's podcasts. He was on there, and then they got into this heated like argument about one of the things that Eddie Bravo really kind of purports. Maybe it wasn't UFOs. What was it? I don't know. 9/11 maybe. I don't know. So, I forget what it was. But he kept saying, "You just haven't looked into it. You just haven't looked into it." Kind of, that was kind of his defense to a lot of things. But he said it so many times that like it became a thing.
Well, it's a great name for his podcast because that's what he's doing. He's out there looking into it. Right? The weird thing about looking into things these days is you can kind of find what you want to find.
Whatever you want.
Right?
Yeah, that's true. Huh?
There's all kinds of things to find what you want.
Yeah.
To find.
We have
if
this
you look
trampoline,
into it deep
like,
enough.
Oh yeah, so we have this trampoline. It's called a rebounder. It's like essentially like a regular little trampoline, but it's like, I don't know, more robust. I don't know, whatever. It's
How big is it?
like the regular size ones, like this table, maybe a little bigger.
That's not a regular size. So when I think trampoline, I think of something that is like 15 feet across.
Yeah.
Like
but
a leg breaker.
Yeah.
But
So
this thing is
it's not
this is
that.
like one of those fitness trampolines
Yes.
where
Yeah.
you jump on it.
Yeah, exactly
Okay,
right.
cool.
But it's the one where it's like there's no noise. It's called a rebounder, if
Okay.
I'm not mistaken. So anyway, one of the claims is that it does something to your lymph system.
Okay.
Like
All right.
it like does something
Yeah.
to it.
Elevates it somehow. Makes it better.
The pressure and here's the thing, that could be 100% true. It could
Well,
be.
Look into it.
Yeah, you look into it. So I go and look in, and my wife, she's like saying, "Yeah, my dad told me," and he has one. And let's face it, the kids jump on it. It's fun. That's my main kind of catalyst or
You
whatever.
didn't even have to look into that.
Yep, the lymph or no lymph systems. It's fun. The kids freaking love it, and whatever. It's good for your legs too, obviously. But I'm like, if I'm gonna talk trash, which I do just jokingly, because I don't know if it helps your lymph system or not. If I'm gonna talk trash, I should at least look into it. So I looked into it, and sure enough, it says, it does this to your lymph system, but then, just like what you're alluding to, where you kind of got to consider the source, and then, what I'm gonna spend my day looking into this 5 websites that said this. Now I got to determine the credibility. So it's like hard, You gotta,
There's all kinds of because you can make a website that has click here for the supporting documentation, but you also wrote the supporting documentation,
Exactly right, yeah.
So even when you're looking into it, you're not
Yeah.
looking in the right place.
Yeah, it's true, man. Holy cow.
What platform is Eddie Bravo's. Do you know what? It's on a platform. I don't know if it's on an open platform.
Oh, I don't know.
I'll have to look into it,
Gotta look
actually.
into
So there you go. Perspective. You got to look into some other people's perspectives and figure out what the whole target, what the whole problem looks like. So there you go. Perspective. Spend some time. Put that on your checklist. The perspective you have, by the way, is not the whole thing. And there's a good chance that your perspective is actually wrong, right? Hey, I don't see any enemy on this target. All you need to do is go 90 degrees in the other direction. You're going to see a bunch of enemies sitting behind a building. Hey, make your bias that your perspective is probably a little bit off. Maybe even make your bias that you're wrong. That what you see is not the whole picture. That what you see is actually a bad picture. That's what I think of my perspective. I think, you know what? This is what I see, and I know my gut instinct is like, I know I'm not seeing everything, and there's more to the picture, and I need to figure out what that is. Make that part of your checklist. Next thing is mission. So is the decision that you're about to make, does it support the mission that you're actually trying to execute on? And not actually more important than that, does it support your overall strategic mission? And this causes all kinds of, there's a term out there. Have you ever heard the term mission creep? Yeah. It's a pretty common term now. Yeah. This is because people don't run this leadership loop in their brain, and they don't ask themselves, hold on a second, what's our mission? What's our overall mission? And is this in support of it? If I make this decision, it's going to help us reach our strategic goals. All kinds of people make that mistake. And we can't allow for that. So what you do is you just run a quick check and say, hold on, does this support the tactical mission that we're trying to execute? Does this support the strategic mission that we're trying to achieve? And if it doesn't, you know it's a bad decision. Next one, leadership capital. And this is one that I recently added to this list. And the reason that I added to the list is because at some point I was having a discussion with somebody, and I realized, actually, let me rephrase this. I was making a decision, and I realized that the main thing that I was calculating was how much this was going to cost me from a leadership capital perspective. Okay. And so first of all, what is leadership capital? Leadership capital is the fact that you can only get people to do so much. As a leader, you can only get people to do so much. There's a when you ask somebody to do something, it costs. It costs you leadership capital. And if they don't want to do it, it costs more. And if they want to do it, then it costs less. And if they do it on their own accord, then it's very cheap, maybe even free. And if you let them do what they want, you're kind of collecting some leadership capital. So just any interaction that I have with Echo Charles, if I say, hey, get this done. Hey, do this. Hey, make a video about this. That costs me leadership capital. Costs me leadership capital. Especially if you don't want to do it. It's costing me even more leadership. Now look, I might have some leadership capital with you and you're like, all right, fine, I'll do it. If you want to do it, if I'm like, hey, make a video with robots exploding, you're like, oh, hell yeah, right? It didn't cost me very much. Mm-hmm. Now, if I say to you, man, I wish we had more videos with robots exploding, and you were like, dude, I'm going to make a sick one. That's very cheap. You're still working, so maybe it costs me a little something. But if I say, hey, man, I have no idea what to do. What do you think we should do? And you're like, we need to make a video with robots exploding. And I go, dude, that's awesome. I actually gain some leadership capital. Mm-hmm. So everything, when people are interacting with each other, there's going to be leadership capital spent. And by the way, every interaction that I have with you, never mind just a tasking, but when we interact with each other, there's leadership capital being exchanged. And we as people always think we have more leadership capital than we do. Here's a couple things that will throw you for a loop. You think rank gives you a bunch of leadership capital? It doesn't. It doesn't. Rank, it gives you a little tiny bit. Because, hey, man, you know, obviously I'm in this position and you haven't been here as long as me and I've done this stuff before. So there's an element of leadership capital that comes with rank. But it's not as much as we think. And actually, when I give ownership to someone, when I say, hey, Echo, you go ahead and run this project the way you want. You seem to have a good grasp on it. That actually earns me leadership capital. So giving ownership earns leadership capital. Listening to someone, as simple as that might sound, gives me leadership capital. When you come to me and say, hey, I want to talk to you about something, I go, oh, and I get out my notebook and I say, hey, tell me what you got. You're like, I have this idea of doing this and I'm writing it down. That gives me leadership capital.
You could do like a little, whether it be for Echelon Front or whatever, you could do like a fun little quiz, right? And it's like leadership capital quiz. Like, is this spending it or earning it, right? And you could do little things. You could probably go pretty deep with that.
You can go real deep. I've covered that in the academy. How to earn leadership capital.
Yeah.
And what costs leadership capital. Yeah. So you definitely, that's good. We could do it on here at some point as well. It's surprising how much listening to people gives you leadership capital. And usually when I talk about the opposite of that is when people go, oh yeah, he's right. Because listen, if you start telling me something, I cut you off. Right? That's true. You might not realize the weight of when you're telling me something and I listen to you. You might not. It's like a subconscious. You be subconsciously giving me leadership capital. Subconsciously be like, oh yeah, hell yeah. True, but when I cut you off and you're trying to express something to me and I just cut you off and I'm like, hey, look, let's get to the topic of the day. Yeah. You're just that cost me a lot of leadership capital. Just like and that's just do with respect. You know what you were talking about earlier? A crappy job. If we got to go pick up brass and I'm out there doing it with you, leadership capital goes up. If I'm in the air conditioning place, leadership capital goes down. So there's all these things that are going on.
Bro, it gets kind of tricky too though. And maybe it's my little pea brain mind going too deep into it. Maybe it's not, but like, let's say you know your story, right? The patches, right? So we'll say you let something slide, right? You let something slide. Sometimes that can, under certain circumstances, that can have you gain leadership capital, but under other circumstances, you can lose it. It's the same action. Bruh. You let something slide, but it's like, oh, you got to understand.
That's why we wrote the dichotomy of leadership.
Yeah, that's why a quiz would be great.
And that's why leadership is tricky. Yeah. It's tricky because you gotta assess that, and that's why I'm talking about this leadership loop, because so often people aren't actually just checking themselves like, wait a second, I wonder how bad Echo actually wants to do this. I wonder what this is costing me. Yeah. The reason that it weighs so heavily for me, first of all, it's because leadership capital is the currency of winning. If you want to win, you got to have a bunch of leadership capital built up, and I put so much on leadership capital because this is interesting thing to think about. Most of the time, one idea, it's only a little bit better than some other idea, right? Very rarely are you and I working at a company or in a military unit or part of a team, and your idea is so radically different from mine that I'm willing to, that I even need to think about, hey, is that a good decision or not? Usually, your idea is pretty good. You're like, in your mind, you're like, hey, I want to explode Star Wars robots, and I think you should explode Terminator robots, right? Are those two things worth arguing about? No. Are they worth it? They're not. I think one thing, you think another thing, but the things that we're thinking are very closely related. So therefore, what trumps the idea, because the ideas are so close, what trumps the idea is leadership capital. We have a common goal. We have a common capability. We have common experiences. And we're going to come up with pretty similar plans because we're both coming from the same place. Therefore, your plan is probably going to be viable. And because your plan is viable, because what did I say? You want Star Wars?
Terminator.
Okay. Yeah. Because you want Terminator robots and I want Star Wars robots, they're both viable. But because they're both viable, I make the expenditure of leadership capital a very heavy weighted element of my decision. because the decision between Star Wars robots or Terminator robot isn't going to make that much of a difference. Now, are there people that freaking dig in about what robot needs to die? Hell yeah, there are. And they're idiots for doing it. I don't care. I don't care. And the reason I don't care is because building leadership capital is the strategic move. That's the strategic move. Because if we're spending leadership capital all the time, we won't have any left. Or we'll, even worse, we'll end up in debt. And that's not going to end well. Because, by the way, when I don't have any leadership capital with you and I ask you to do something, you're not going to do it. If I have a ton of leadership capital and I need you to do something and there's no time to talk about it and you don't believe in it, but I need to get it done, I can actually spend some of that leadership capital and we can move forward. So that's what I'm going to do. When I'm making a decision as to whether or not to go left or right or use Terminator robots or Star Wars robots, I'm going to put a huge amount of weight on how much leadership capital this is going to cost me and see and weigh whether this is the right move or not. Most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, it's not. Leadership capital is more valuable than any other element in the world. Leadership capital. Everything that's wrapped up in leadership capital: trust, integrity, vision, unity. There's all these things that are wrapped up in it. That's what makes it so valuable. It's like this thing that has so much power. And yet people will throw it away. People don't even realize how valuable it is. They'll just throw it away on this, that, or the other thing. Like, hey, Echo, you just need to get this done. Boom, I just spent freaking however many units worth of leadership capital. Dude, you just need to be quiet and get this done. Boom, I was just throwing money away. Hey, Jocko, I got to go to, hey, look, I don't need to hear your ideas right now. We need to move forward. Okay, cool. That just cost me. It's like everything we do. People just throw it away like it's nothing. They break out the freaking, they go into debt. Then they end up bankrupt.
Leadership.
You ever met someone that has no leadership capital left?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, like you work for someone that's an asshole. You work for someone that doesn't listen to anybody else. They have no leadership capital.
Yeah.
And maybe they can make some things happen early on because they have the authority or they have the experience or they have the position that they can actually make a little bit of progress, and then the leadership capital's gone and everything just falls apart.
Yeah. And that's like a back, and I've said this before, so I don't need to go too deep into it, but you know how like you have an old boss that you used to work for and he was just a dick or whatever and you don't work there anymore. You work at a better job now, you know, and then maybe you see that old boss somewhere, the way you feel about him, you can see his leadership capital is at zero. At that point.
It's zero. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to consider leadership capital, and it's going to weigh very heavily. And by the way, the reason I didn't put this on the list originally because it was so integral to the way I think I didn't even see it there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just one of those things. It was almost like if I was to put down, what do you need every day, Echo? You'd be like, hey, I need a good workout. I need to get a good steak. I want to roll jiu-jitsu. And but what about oxygen? What about air? And you'd be like, well, yeah, obviously. That's leadership capital for me was like breathing air. It was that integral to my day. I didn't even see it was there.
Yeah.
So,
but, yeah, now that you bring it up, though, it's like, it's not like air, right? Because it's so like people don't understand.
No, actually wrong. It is like air.
Oh, it is, but they're ignoring it, so it's like, dang,
well,
bro.
it is, but people don't realize how valuable until they can't breathe. So they don't even realize it's there, and they're there like just wasting it, and it doesn't matter. It'll always be there. No, it's not. You get choked out. That's what happens. Tell me you're not concerned about air when you get that guillotine choke sunk on you.
I am concerned about air at that point.
Real concern.
Yes.
So be careful.
Tell me if you think this is an example of being in touch with leadership capital. So, you know, as you know, we have this dog now. Small dog. Never wanted a dog. I didn't want a dog.
What's your dog's name?
Maya. It's a small little what do you call it? Yorkie?
I don't know what you call it because I don't have the dog.
Come on, bro. You know what it's called. Anyway, one
Small
of these
dog.
little small dogs.
Okay.
Whatever. It's cute. Whatever. I never wanted the dog, though. Bro, why are you we're going to add another thing to the simple life. All the kids want dogs. My wife, maybe she wanted the dog, maybe not, but she hears it from the kids every day. Oh, my gosh. Every time the kids see a dog.
Yep.
And there's people in our neighborhood with cool little dogs and stuff, and they're nice dogs, and so they're great examples of dogs all around, constantly being reminded how they don't have a dog, right? So finally I'm like, hey, all right, I kind of went through this loop a little bit. in a small way where
Yep.
I'm like, hey,
You
know,
weighed
like
leadership capital at some point in there.
Exactly right. So I'm like, all right.
Now,
whatever.
this would be actually an interesting thing for us to do is go through your decision to get a dog and assess your leadership loop on this thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, time. Well, you do have plenty of time to make this decision. So you didn't like rush one weekend and be like, okay, we need to get a dog now. No, you took time to consider it.
2 years, by the way.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Cover and move.
Mhm.
You were like, hey, if we don't get a dog, is that putting me first? Yes, it is.
Yes.
And so you kind of made that decision like
Like,
okay,
way
got to
first,
put the
too.
team first.
Yeah.
Simple. This is one of those things where you're like, well, this is going to actually make things more complex. So you had to put that into the calculus, right? Yeah. Prioritize and execute. Well, is it one of our priorities? Well, we saw some family unity being created. And so that was a positive thing. So the priority kind of stepped up a little bit because we want the family to be tight.
And there's other elements in that too, because like, okay, so my daughter's 9, so getting a small dog too. This is like a small. It's not like some big Great Dane where it's like more responsibility or whatever. It's a small little dog, minimal, arguably responsibility comparatively speaking, and you have a pet that it actually is responsibility for the kid, obviously being supported by us, of course, but you get to learn a little bit of that responsibility, sacrifice, and stuff like that. So it was a net as far as priorities go and the developmental elements of a kid. And let's face it, like, is it unreasonable for a kid to have a childhood pet? Is that unreasonable?
No, it's good. And as you just mentioned,
pretty normal.
There's lessons to be learned.
Exactly right.
Which goes into decentralized command. You know that, is this something you can decentralize? So did you go, oh, we're going to get this dog and then I'm going to have to walk it, I'm going to have to feed it? No, you were probably like, hey, I'm not cleaning up dog shit, right? I'm not going to be the one that feeds it every day. So you knew you could decentralize some of this stuff. So that is additionally positive here. Was it your ego that was getting in the way a little bit? Because, hey, check it out. Let's face it. The dog is going to take a little attention away from Echo Charles. Just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And plus, you might have been like, hey, this is my house. Yeah. Right? You could get into that mode.
And that is...
I'm not saying you did, but it could be a factor.
It did a little bit. Maybe not necessarily in that particular way. Like, this is my house and I make the rules. It wasn't that. It was more about like, oh, yeah, everyone wants this dog, but what about what I want? It was like that. Yeah. And I was like, bro, that's kind of whack, when I realized that.
Good. Okay. Emotion. You had to at least check the emotion that you were having and that everyone else was having. Because if you don't, you weighed in how happy everyone was going to be. And that countered how like somewhat frustrated you were going to be. You actually went through this and thought to yourself, you know what? Them being super happy outweighs me being a little bit aggravated. So you did the calculus of the emotion, made the right call. Mission. Does this help our mission as a family? Again, helps bring the family together. There's lessons to be learned. We have something to talk about. We have a common affection towards this thing. Yep. Even though this thing is small and weak and doesn't really protect us from anything, which is okay.
But it gets the kids outside even more. Right. All this stuff.
Yeah. Leadership cap. So this is where we get to. So now you got to a point where it's leadership capital. And how did you calculate that on the dog purchase?
Which in a small way went back to measuring the emotions and comparing them, but it was essentially that. Like everyone knew that I didn't want a dog. In fact, they've been knowing it for 2 years. I'm not the kind of person, whatever that's like, no, like I don't complain about that kind of stuff. But everyone knew that I was not really into it at all. When we got it, I didn't be like, yeah, I wasn't into it, but I did it anyway for you guys. None of that kind of stuff. Good. I was just kind of like, hey, if that's what we're doing, let's do it. And actually, I will clean up after it. Okay. Not as a priority, but I'm down for the support, 100%. So when it was time to get the dog or whatever, I was like, I basically got on board. And I figured, and I guess in terms of leadership capital, I wasn't thinking of it in terms of leadership capital, but I wasn't thinking of it in terms of like, hey, what's the right thing to do here? And something that would, if I get on board in a positive way, in a conducive way, that's going to be better off for everybody. So that's just what I did. But kind of maybe, how should I say, inadvertently or whatever, just not thinking of it. I'm sure that did. Because people know that I didn't want the dog, but meanwhile, I have a good attitude about it. Yeah. I'm still cleaning up. And let's face it, this is the classic tale, right? Where the dad doesn't want the dog, then the dad ends up being the best friend of the dog kind of a thing, We're not quite there yet, but I have embraced the dog on a personal level. Teeny tiny dog.
Check.
So I feel like if they even notice, who knows?
Yeah.
They're little kids.
Yep.
You know, they probably don't
I
even
guarantee you
notice,
got some leadership capital out of this. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's good. Because over time, also, you got to think, how much am I spending leadership capital when this is the one thing they want and I'm not getting it for them?
Yeah.
That could be a problem. And I shouldn't even say, like, it probably wouldn't actually be that big of a problem. And the reason it's not that big of a problem, because it's a huge ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge ask. A dog is a big deal, man.
Yeah.
You can't just be getting a dog on a whim. You should go through this checklist before you go and invest in a dog or pick up a dog from the dog pound or whatever you're going to do.
Here's what I do have in mind consciously in regards to leadership capital. If I complain about that dog or about having the dog, not even necessarily about the dog,
Yep.
because you can complain about, like, frick, the dog's barking, you know, whatever. But if I complain about having the dog,
Yep.
that is, like, to me, it feels like I'm, like, spending so much of that leadership capital because it's like, I never wanted that dog, you know,
Oh,
making everyone feel guilty
Oh, yeah,
or something like this. Never. It's against the straight up morals.
Yeah. That would be
That's
bad.
how strict I think that
That
rule
would be
is.
bad.
Yeah.
So, leadership capital. Put that in the calculus. It's more valuable than the air that you breathe from a leadership perspective. Now, the next thing is, I've mentioned this a bunch already, but as I'm judging or assessing all these aspects of a decision, I am going to the whole time pay attention to my own bias. Yeah, you know, do I tend to think that I have too much leadership capital? Because there's people that are like that. They think, oh, hey, man, don't worry. I'm Jocko, man. People are just going, no. Do I underestimate the amount of leadership capital that I have? First of all, that's rare, and it's usually not true. But those are things that I am going to do. I am going to constantly be assessing my own bias. So you might want to throw onto your leadership loop bias assessment to make sure that you're not making a mistake because of the biases that you have. And or you can put that into each one of these topics. Ego, emotion, mission, leadership capital. You can put bias into each one of those subcategories to say, you know what? I know I'm always let my ego get in the way. Or maybe you're saying the other opposite side. You know, I'm never confident enough with my decisions. On time, right? What's your bias? Do you think everything takes 5 minutes when it really takes a half an hour? Calculate that bias. And then the last thing I'm going to say here is something that I like to think about. Am I looking at the symptoms or am I looking at the root cause? Because a lot of times the solution that's right in front of your face is actually a solution to a symptom. And we see this like 2D solution that's right in front of us, and it's usually obvious. And here's what's tricky, it's usually right. Usually the first, you know, if Echo's doing something, or if we got to come up with a plan, and I come up with a quick plan to solve a problem, usually that first plan that we both see is a solution, and it will work. But there's a good chance that we're both reacting to a symptom and not to the disease. So I like to just check myself and say, is what I'm looking at the symptom, or is it the actual root cause of the problem? And is the solution that's being proposed, or the plan I'm coming up with, is it a 2D solution for something that's right in front of me, or is it a 3D that will actually get us a long-term solution? So that's what I'm going to look at. Now, here's what messes us up in this loop, and it's pretty similar to what can mess you up in the OODA loop. Number one is you can get stuck in any one of these areas. Just like you get stuck in the OODA loop. In the OODA loop, you can get stuck observing. You're just looking around, trying to see what you see. You're trying to get every angle, and you get stuck there. You get stuck looking around, and you get shot down. Maybe you get stuck orienting yourself. You're like, wait, hold on, where are they? Where am I? Hold on, let me see exactly where I'm in. You get shot down. Maybe you get stuck in the decision mode. Wait, should I go left? Should I go right? Should I left? Go right? I don't know. There's advantages to going left. There's advantages going right. You get shot down. Or act. You won't take action. You don't do the action. You get shot down. So if you get stuck in any of these as well, same thing. If you get stuck thinking about any of these things and you let it become the focus, I want to make sure my ego's not a problem. So, and that's what you focus on. You don't consider time. You don't consider emotion. You don't consider the mission. So you can't get stuck on any of these things. You can't get stuck. You have to let the loop continue to flow. And you know what you're going to figure out? You're going to figure out that there's some things that you're good at in this loop, and there's some things that you're bad at in this loop. Maybe your ego's not a problem, but you have a problem with time. Maybe your emotion isn't a problem, but you always get distracted by different missions. Maybe you cover and move really well, but you don't realize that you expend leadership capital on stuff that doesn't matter. So you want to continually observe these things, and you want to over-index on the things that you know you are weak at. So that's the number one way that we get messed up when we're making decisions. The number two thing is we ignore the feedback that we're getting, which is such a disaster. It's such a disaster to ignore the feedback that we're getting. And the point I made earlier about Echo Charles and how my ego is going to lie to me. Your ego is lying 100% of the time. Let me just say that. My ego is saying, actually, in this case, Jocko, look, I know I get it, but this case, Echo really is the problem. He really is the problem. And when I ignore that, the fact that, sorry, not that I ignore, but I let my ego convince me that, you know what, this time, just this one time, my ego's right. Yeah. It's not. Or just this one time, hey, this is an emotional decision. It's the right thing to do. Jocko said you need to put emotions into calculus, and I'm pissed, so we're going to do it. No. We ignore feedback. And, of course, this comes from a lack of humility. When you're being told something, even in your own head, but you ignore it, like, I know Echo might kind of get screwed by this decision, but, he's not going to notice. Boom. You're just lying to yourself. You're ignoring the feedback, and that's going to cost you. And so in order to do that, this comes back to a fundamental skill of leadership that I wrote about in Leadership Strategy and Tactics, and that is the ability to take a step back and detach. That's the only way you're going to see this stuff. Detachment is a superpower, and the reason that detachment is a superpower is because the solution to the problem is not in the problem. The solution to the problem will not be found inside the problem. You got to step outside the problem in order to see the solution. Don't get wrapped up in the problem itself. Instead, take a step back, run through this loop so you can make better decisions. And what is an important thing to recognize? You might be thinking like, oh, well, I'm not, the CEO of some big company and I don't need to make a bunch of decisions. Guess what? Life is a series of decisions all day, every day. That's what life is. Everything that you do is a decision. It's almost like the binary decision, which I wrote about in Discipline Equals Freedom's manual. Everything that you do is a decision. They're not always necessarily binary, but when you live life, you're making decisions. Everything you do is a decision. So because everything you do is a decision, once you realize that, you should detach and you should have a protocol for making decisions, because then your decisions will be better. And you should have the humility to realize when you aren't making good decisions, and when you get that feedback and realize, I got to make some different decisions now. And then you make adjustments and you make better decisions and you move on. And what's beautiful about this is it means that if everything in your life is based on the decisions you're making, guess what? You have a lot of control over your life based on the decisions that you make. So make good decisions. It's going to make you a better person. It's going to make you a better leader. It's going to give you a better life. All right. There you go. Echo Charles.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of good decisions, I know there's some ways that people could decide to support themselves a little bit better.
Yep, it's true.
And they could support this podcast while they're doing it.
It's true.
They could support America while they're doing it.
Very true, yeah.
Which is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Especially considering how tenuous the world is right now. The world's a tenuous place.
Sure.
There's other elements out there making a move.
Yeah.
Got China making a move. They're out there making a move.
Yeah.
They're trying to the Russia's out there. They're making a move.
Yeah.
People are stepping up.
Moves are being made.
Moves are being made. Yeah. And are we going to sit back? Now, does this mean you need to pick up a rifle and go to war? No. But I'll tell you what you can do. You can support America.
Mm-hmm.
I know a good way to do that.
Yeah. Me too. Well, it starts with ourselves, right? I think a lot of the time where
Dude,
you're
no doubt
talking
about
about good decisions where, look, other people are not making decisions for you unless you're letting them. But you want to make good decisions for yourself, right? I would imagine. So it starts with yourself. We're taking care of ourselves physically, mentally, deciding to.
That's what we're doing.
It's true.
Yep.
Yep. So we're working out, of course.
100%.
We're reading. I know that.
Yes, we are.
We should be. At the very least, listening.
Are you reading?
But, I'm reading here and there.
Bro, I don't know about this. Wait a second here. What are you reading?
Well, there's a book.
Because you can't reference Mind Games, which you read 9 years ago.
Yeah, probably.
And I think that may be the only book you've ever referenced since I've known you.
Oh, no, I've read plenty.
Okay,
of
what do we got? What's on the docket, Echo Charles?
More so than I'm gonna tell you what's currently on the docket because they'd have to, But
wait a second, bro. You can be honest. We're telling each other the truth.
Okay.
This is like leadership, capital we're trying to build. And if
Okay.
you're not going to tell me like, oh, no, right now I'm not reading anything, Jocko, because, it's summertime and I was in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And so we're not reading anything. Unless you are.
yes, so
So what are we reading right now?
Okay,
Nothing or this book?
So depends because that's a spectrum. Right?
Bro,
is
you
there-
should own this 100%
Okay.
right now. Otherwise, it's not going to look good.
Here's the 100% truth on
Okay.
the matter. So I have Kindle books and audio books. Like, some are halfway done, some are
Yeah.
all done, some are
Okay.
whatever. So how much time has to be elapsed between the last time I was into one of these books, actually like reading it or listening to it, to now? How much time has to pass before I'm technically not reading?
Let's just say a week.
Okay. We might not be reading. But
All right.
that being
Well,
said,
that's kind of a bummer. That means that the books that you're reading or even listening to must not be that captivating.
I guess in a manner of speaking, technically, yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're not captivating. That might mean that other things that I'm doing,
They're competing
Are
with
very
life,
competing
and
with
life is captivating, which is a good thing,
yes, sir.
right?
But
I never thought of that comeback. Some people are like, I'm reading 3 books a week. Be like, oh, that's cool. I'm actually living,
yeah,
right? That could be a little bit of a dichotomy.
could be, yes, and obviously that's going to depend because reading 3 books a week, we don't know how fast they read or listen or whatever, or what they're doing. You know, what if they're going on miles, runs, doing the same thing? It's kind of so it can be awesome. It can be kind of what you're alluding to, where it's like,
What
cool.
if I'm flexing though?
That's fine. Oh wait, flexing with the
Like-
I'm reading. That's just
Yeah.
a flex.
Like the 4th book I've read this month.
Right. Just to sort of brag.
Just flexing.
And make well, there are many variations of flexing. So,
Because it'd
I
be
don't
an
know.
interesting reflex. Would be like, hey, I don't have time to read books.
Yeah. Or that could be an excuse.
It could be an excuse.
Yeah. So it just
Okay.
depends.
All right.
It's a dichotomy.
Okay, so where is Echo Charles
the
at
last
in this
book that I
spectrum that we were
finished-
considering?
The last book that I finished, which was recently, I don't know, whatever, a few months. Actually, I read it twice.
Okay.
So, was The 4 Agreements.
Oh.
Recommended by Jason
Jason
Gardner.
Gardner.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And you guys, I heard you guys talking about it, and you seemed both, you were both concurred that it was good stuff.
And a lot of times that type of book, and I mean that type of book in this particular way it's real like it has a lot of spiritual like terms, but usually spiritual terms are real like they land on different people in different
Okay,
ways.
I'm not tracking spiritual term, i.e.
Yeah.
what? What's a spiritual term?
Like calling things black magic, or because he'll use that term a lot.
Yeah,
black
but
magic.
he's using those terms because I heard you guys talking about it, and I think I might have even been talking to you a little bit about it, or Jason. Those are just like an analogy.
Yeah.
Like this type of attitude is black magic that's negative.
Yes.
Right?
So I took it in that way.
Okay.
Like
It's not
this
like he
is
was
an
saying it was
analogy.
literal black magic.
Yeah, and every once in a while it kind of felt like that.
Okay.
But either way, I never took it as that. Like to me, that's not the useful part of it. The useful part is many other things. But anytime they say something like black magic, I know what he's saying. I know what you mean. I think I do anyway. I believe I do. So I put it that way. I took it in that way. But yeah, so that being said, the spiritual parts, even with those spiritual parts or whatever, like what he was saying with all the 4 agreements is like it's a good one.
Okay.
It's a good one. And a lot of it might not come as like a surprise, like, oh man, I totally didn't know that. But just like a lot of books about like ways to think and regard yourself in the world and stuff, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense, or that's a good reminder. You know,
it's kind of like what we just covered. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, of course you should consider if you're screwing over your buddy. Yep, and it seems obvious, but there's times that people do this, aware, unaware. And I think the big warning there is like, you think no one notices, everyone notices. So yeah, some things can be. Actually, I think when something seems obvious, usually that's affirming to like, this is pretty true, because I know I felt this way, and now I'm seeing this guy felt this way, and now so it becomes like a thing.
Yeah. And sometimes it just puts certain things, certain elements into perspective that you might not have realized how important they are, or how prevalent they are in day-to-day, stuff.
Awareness.
Yeah.
When you're aware of things, you become just awareness is a huge step up in understanding and reacting properly and interacting properly with the world.
Like the idea that you actually brought up a few times today, the idea that like people notice. Like I see what you're doing, or I see whether it be your intention or when they're getting screwed over, whatever. Like the idea that people can see what's going on. That I think that's one of the many things that's like, it helps to understand how big of a thing that is. Like, you know how it's like, yeah, sometimes they'll notice, sometimes they won't. It kind of feels like that sometimes.
They notice.
Oh yeah, people know it. Like, you know how, and I've said this before, I got it from Sam Harris, where it's like when you name drop someone, it's like, bro, everyone sees you name dropping, and it's not even like a noble thing.
You mean when you talk about I got this from Sam Harris?
Oh, yeah. After we hung out this one day, it was awesome. But that's like, one of the many examples of, sure, maybe somebody caught it, but I'm sure it was effective when I did. But bro, everyone noticed the same way you'll notice when someone else does it. It's kind of one of those things. But and there's a lot of things like that. So yeah, I think that book overall was a lot of that. But some stuff was like, oh, that is a good way to look at things. You know?
And sometimes when somebody's written something out and they've explained it, it clarifies it for you. It increases your understanding, and the better understanding you have, then the more you can interact with that properly. You can utilize that as a tool. Yeah. That's good stuff. So, we want to read.
On varying levels.
Because I'm reading one book a week over here, Flex.
Hey, man, it's good. If you're reading one book a week, that's good, man.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that that's bad.
Yeah. I don't actually know if there was a while where I was reading one book every week when we were doing the podcast, and it was like almost all books. Yeah. And then it seemed like a bunch of people were coming on for interviews. So that was a little bit more interview centric. So, but this I can say, there is no period of time of more than 2 days where I haven't read something. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at. But that's not a flex, bro, because guess what? Maybe I should be, surfing or getting in fights at REI.
Sure. Hell yeah, parking lot fights.
Situations.
But we are working out every day.
You know Joel Tudor, yeah.
Of course.
Joel Tudor, if you don't know, he's a surfer and a jiu-jitsu guy and an awesome guy. But he like posted something about like basically kook surfers, like, surfer starter kit. Malibu surfer starter kit, and one of the pictures was like a Sprinter. I responded on this post. I was like, "Hey, bro, I got a Sprinter." Yeah. So sorry, Joel. Joel. I got a Sprinter. There, people.
Well, so it's kind of a confirmation, really, in a small way.
Oh, you call me a kook, huh? That's messed up. I was up on the horses, and I asked the guys, the actual cowboys. I said, hey, in surfing, if you don't know how to surf, but you have a surfboard and you're paddling out, but you have no idea what you're doing, then you're a kook. I said, what's that called on horseback riding? And because that's me, because I don't know how to ride a horse. And they said, it's a dude. Huh. So there's a thing called a dude ranch, which is basically for city slickers to go out and like be a cowboy for a little while.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so if you're one of those people, then you are a dude.
That's weird. I've heard of dude ranch. I thought it was something else.
There was another word that they told me as well, but I can't remember it. Yeah. But I was one of those. I am one of those on a horse.
You're a dude?
Yeah.
That's funny. There was a show called Hey Dude, and it was about a dude ranch, and it was on like Nickelodeon too or something.
Back in the day.
a day. Well, hey man, you learn something new every day. See, sometimes you don't even have to read. You just come listen to Jocko being a dude, or whatever you're being over there. But we are working out every day.
Yes.
Yes, like currently working out. Like
You can make that claim. You don't have to sort of put explanations around that claim. Bro, your face was so guilty when you said you read. I was like, dude, please don't lie in front of everybody.
I was trying to do the calculus because that's a legitimate question. Because like if you say, oh, I'm working out, right, but you haven't worked out in 2 weeks, you're like, bro, you're not working out.
Yep.
You're currently not working out,
Yep.
actually. But if it's been like 2 days, that's like, okay, you could have just been coming off a rest weekend or something like this, and you're still on the program, see what I'm saying, or working out. So with reading, how is that? I never thought about it. So look, if I read last night before I went to bed or something, easy, right? I know the answer. Oh, well, I'm reading this. Last night I was reading this, but let's face it.
It's been 3 weeks.
So that was
and
the
3
guiltiness.
weeks is kind of a gift, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I'm gonna agree with you.
kind of a gift.
Yeah.
I'm giving you the opportunity to tell the truth.
Wait. What do you mean 3 weeks is a gift?
I'm saying, oh, you were reading 3 weeks ago. You were reading.
Oh yeah. Me.
It's
Yeah.
kind of me being not generous.
Yeah. Technically, I don't know. I've never done the math and the technical, evaluation. But if you compare it
But
to
I hope
working
you
out,
never get interrogated.
I know.
You're
bro, I
not
know.
good.
Me too. If you compare it to working out, then no, I'm not reading. Currently not
Check.
reading. But here's the thing too, though.
Did you already lift today?
No, not
Sure.
yet.
This afternoon?
Squats today. By the
Oh,
way.
okay.
Yeah.
You have
Either
to
way.
get that mental prep going.
Yeah, a little bit. But here's the thing about reading versus working out. You can pick up a book for like 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You can read 3 pages. Working out, if I go do 1-2 sets of curls, is that a workout? I know it's BTN. I know. BTN is better than nothing.
Yeah.
Which is a non-philosophy in my opinion. But
Oh, dang,
that's
look
just,
at this.
That's just my
Going
opinion.
deep.
How about this? We'll use that philosophy very sparingly. How about that?
All right.
But you see what I'm saying, though.
Yes, you can read a short amount, and it still is providing legitimate benefits and progress.
Yeah.
Whereas 2 sets of curls,
Yeah.
while it is BTN, if you believe in that philosophy, which Echo doesn't,
Yeah.
I would say it truly is BTN. It is better than nothing.
Yeah, but if I go 2 sets of curls and then now I say, you know what, that's going to be my workout routine, bro, after about 2 months, it's kind of like an end. Nothing. In a matter of speaking. So, okay, look, we got to the bottom of it. Thank you, Jocko, for your input. We're hopefully reading. We're
All right.
hopefully working out. We're hopefully improving ourselves so we can deal with the world in a better way to make better decisions.
Right.
All right.
So get some Jocko Fuel. JockoFuel.com. Get
It'll
yourself some
help
more. Get
It'll help
yourself some. Hey, this is of all the things we're gonna say about Jocko Fuel. The flavors of the Discipline Go drinks have been radically upgraded. They were based on my taste buds before. My taste buds are not normal. My taste buds weren't appropriate to judge the taste of a drink for the world. I had to run that through the leadership decision loop and say, wait, my perspective on this is not correct. Other people have a better palate for the job. And we also want something that's more universally loved. So we redid all the flavors. All the flavors are now awesome. You may have had one flavor that you really liked before, and you might have had 2 that you just like, these are gross.
Weren't down for you.
Now you'll at least like all the flavors. And there will be 3 and maybe 5 of them that you love.
Yeah, I would say
So-
that's probably true.
Totally redid them all. They taste delicious. If you tried them when they were based on my palate, I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm taking ownership of the fact that I had a very sensitive palate to sweetness, and a little bit of sweetness tasted like sugar cane in my mouth, and that wasn't the truth.
Besides
So
this,
we made it better.
You just drink water though, pretty for the
That's
most
what I'm saying.
part.
That's why my palate
Yeah.
was so jacked.
And recently I got on the water train. So the only thing that I drink is water. Every once in a while I'll have like a milk shake. Actually I have that more, but even now everything is way sweeter. Everything. If you just drink water. Before I have an occasional Gatorade here, maybe some, the kids got some orange
Well,
juice.
that's a good example too. Mango, I didn't like your mango flavor of Discipline Go. Mango Mayhem. And now it tastes really good. It's still not my favorite of the group, but I will definitely enjoy drinking it. So we're good.
Yep. I feel like we're good too.
So there you go. Get out here and get you some of that. Also, we got the hunt gear coming. OriginUSA.com. Get yourself some American-made hunt gear. And listen, that's just what we have to do in the world right now. There's, like I said, there's people that are stepping up, people that are not good, and they're stepping up, and they're trying to take over. And you don't need to necessarily pick up a rifle to go to war, but right now it's an economic war. And if you pick up some Origin USA gear, it's going to help us win the war, so we don't have to fight a war. That's the goal. Let's be economically strong. So go to OriginUSA.com, get a gi, because you should be training jiu-jitsu just in case the war does come.
Yep.
Get some hunt gear, just in case the war does come. You can hunt the enemy. Sure. But in the meantime, you can hunt deer, elk, whatever else it is you want to hunt. Get yourself some of that. Also, we have a store. Don't we have a store?
We do.
Okay. What's that all about?
It's called Jocko Store. You want to represent, well, we're, improving ourselves, making good decisions. You want to represent discipline equals freedom, which is kind of the overarching kind of thing for this whole thing. The more discipline you are, the more freedom you have. Anyway, you want to represent. We got some cool shirts and hats and hoodies and whatnot, some merch. But it's better than just merch, though, by the way. A lot of thought and effort and careful, meticulous consideration has been put into all these elements.
You should put that into every package that you send out.
I'm going
Just let everybody know that careful time consideration has been put into this.
Oh yeah, and it's true.
Thing.
There are many people, and when I say many, I mean for countless people that have said these, like this, called the shirts and stuff like. It's my favorite
What's
shirt.
up with the new shirt that you have on right now? This is called the standard issue,
yep.
right?
Discipline equals freedom, standard issue. So it's a new one.
And there's multiple colorways.
Yeah. You might recognize the the colors and what they represent. But if you don't, that's
there's
fine.
some kind of layer there.
Yes, sir.
People need to figure out what the layers mean.
Yep. Simple, but maybe not easy. Kind of a thing.
I actually didn't figure out. You guys told me. I may have figured out. If I would have maybe seen them all at the same time and done a consideration, I might have figured it out. But I didn't figure it out. But also, I looked at him for like 3 seconds. I was like, all right, do tell me.
Well, when you looked at the one, you were like, that's what that is. And then all you had to do is apply that same thinking to all of them. You'd be like, oh, I see what's going on here. But but either way, layers there for sure. But if you don't know layers, it doesn't even matter. You just choose the color that you like or the colors.
And then if you do understand the layers, then it kind of matters too.
Yes, sir.
Doesn't matter if you don't get them, but if you get them, it kind of does matter.
Yeah,
Let's face it, because if you listen, you know.
This is the way I see it. This one is kind of like this, what we call it, standard issue. It's kind of like the main one we're positioning as kind of the main discipline equals freedom, the standard. If you have this one, you're that's the standard.
You have the standard issue.
Yep. Like if you don't have it, like, are you even in the game or what? I'm not saying you're not, but you see what I'm saying.
There's a question.
You don't have the standard issue, is what I'm saying.
All right, there you go.
So yeah, JockoStore.com. We also have the shirt locker. Don't forget about that subscription. One shirt, a new shirt, 1 a month. There, new, different designs, a little bit more creative, I would say. Those are pretty good ones coming out.
Yeah, you gave me a brief on the one that's coming out.
Yep.
I'll say it's affirmative.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
It's good.
Is that next? When is that? How far out is that?
So
August,
about
2 months out.
September.
Ooh, that's a good one for September. All right, awesome. Subscribe to the podcast. You know that. JockoUnderground.com. We've been putting some out there. If you want to get some questions to us, we'll respond to those directly. And it's also given us the ability to have our own platform to make sure that whenever we get banned from this one, which could happen at any time, or they might just say, hey, from now on, when you listen to this podcast, we're going to insert our own advertisements in here. So we don't like that. That's why we made JockoUnderground.com. So if you want to go there, subscribe to that. YouTube channel. If you want to see awesome assistant directing from me, you can check out that, and I'll get you covered down.
Thanks.
Psychological Warfare on MP3. FlipsideCanvas.com. Dakota Meyer. I've written a bunch of books about leadership. Check them out. Only Cry for the Living by Holly McKay. That's Jocko Publishing. She wrote that book. She risked her life to go write that book. So she's been on the podcast. The book is insane to read, and it will teach you about the world and about evil in the world. So check that out. We also have Echelon Front Leadership Consultancy. echelonfront.com if you want me to come and talk to your company. Let us know. echelonfront.com if you need help. We can help you. If you want to go to any of the events that I've been talking about, things like the muster, things like the council, things like EF Battlefield, just come and check those. The next EF Battlefield is sold out, but it's at Little Bighorn. Looking forward to that. I think the next muster is in Atlanta, Hotlanta, October 12th to the 14th. We sell out everything, so if you want to come, get there quick. And also, we have the online training academy. I mentioned that a couple times today. Teaching people how to lead in their life. And a lot of times people think, oh, I don't need to learn how to lead. I'm only in charge of 3 people. Or I don't need to know how to lead because I'm not even in charge of anyone. Guess what? You are in charge of someone. You're making decisions all the time. You have a family. You have peers that you need to lead. You have to lead your boss. I know that seems crazy. So go to extremeownership.com if you want to get in on that online training.
I saw a weakness in you on your latest podcast. You seem to overlook the fact that some infant children were raised in undisciplined environments with undisciplined parents. They grow up having modeled these undisciplined examples. I hate the fact that I have gross undisciplined behavior. Solving this is a major priority in my life. You have zero idea of what this experience is like for me. You seem blind to this struggle, like a father who would ignore their child's struggle and offer only the words, man up.
So this is a good question, and I see where this guy's coming from for sure. And I know that it can be very, very frustrating to try and become disciplined. And I apologize that I haven't talked about the fact of what to do if you come from an undisciplined family or you have undisciplined parents. I haven't really talked about what to do in that situation, but there's a reason that I haven't talked about that before, and that is because you don't get discipline from your parents. You don't get discipline from your parents, from your grandparents, from your older brothers and sisters. You don't get discipline from an external source. You have to get it from you. That's what self-discipline is. You get it from yourself. You get it from you. So there's people from every possible background, from no parents to crazy parents to, drug-addicted parents to super squared-away parents, and everywhere in between on that spectrum that are completely disciplined people. More disciplined than anyone I know. It doesn't come from your parents. You don't inherit it. And there's another piece here. It's called ownership, right? It's called ownership. And if you want to blame other people for the problem, and I say this all the time, if you don't take ownership of the problem's not going to get solved. So if you blame your parents for not having raised you in a disciplined environment, you're not going to solve that problem. You're looking at your parents saying, if you would have done a better job being more disciplined for me, I would be more disciplined now. So that means you can't do anything. The fact of the matter is it's wrong. You actually can do something. And it doesn't matter how your parents raised you and brought you up. You can have the discipline. You need to decide to do it. So as long as you're blaming other people. I mean, if you blame me for not discussing it, you blame me for having zero idea what that experience is like, you blame your parents for not raising you this way, as long as you're blaming other people, as long as you're counting on other people to give you discipline, as long as you do that, you will not have it. So, again, I'm sorry, I should make that more clearly, and I'm trying to make it more clearly now. And like my parents are good people. They had successful careers as educators in public schools. And my mom eventually went into school administration, and my dad taught in high school for 30-something years, and they were good, hardworking people. And but I'll tell you, they were no extraordinary preachers of discipline. And I'll tell you, I I never remember either one of them ever using the term or referring to discipline in any way. And actually both my parents worked. They both worked a lot. My dad was coaching sports and we're doing after school stuff. My mom, same thing. Like, we were on our own a bunch. My parents were gone in the morning. We got ourselves to school. When we got home in the afternoon, they weren't home. So it wasn't like they were setting up this rigid, disciplined manner for me, right? Yeah. And you can see this with families, many, many different families. There's families that have kids that the parents are very disciplined and the kids are wild and out of control. Sometimes they're problematically so, right? Kids that come from really good families, but they get addicted to drugs, lack of discipline. Kids that come from really good families, but they spin out of control and go in the wrong direction. And there's also the opposite, which is, hey, the parents weren't around, or the parents were abusive, or the parents were drug addicts, and all of a sudden the kid comes out of that and is squared away, is awesome. And we saw that all the time in the SEAL teams. And I've said that before on this program. It doesn't matter where your background is. It's what you decide to do.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another thing. It's not even from the military. Like, the military requires discipline, obviously. But there's plenty of people in the military that don't have it, right? And many people lose their discipline when they leave the military because it's not being imposed on them anymore. So, I mean, just go look around. Being in the military does not make you a disciplined person. Being from a disciplined family does not make you a disciplined person. Being in a disciplined group does not make you a disciplined person. What makes you a disciplined person is choosing to be disciplined.
It's like,
no, it's like the pillow feels soft and comfortable.
Yeah.
And the
waking up
from anywhere.
Yeah. Thought about making in quote unquote get out. Can't appreciate it until you're in a specific.
So do it, brother. Good luck. Get on the path and stay on the path.
Yeah, and that's going to be beneficial when you do that. Worth it. That's it.
Yeah.
And if it's not worth it to you, and that I think is what you develop, the value of working out, the value of.
But you can develop that from anywhere.
That's what I'm saying. That's essentially that's part of the point.
Necessarily say the same thing to this guy. You want to be more disciplined? Get after it. That's it, man. Get up early, do some kind of workout, eat good foods, clean your room, make a list of things that you're supposed to do in your life, and then wake up in the morning and do those things that you put on the list. That's what discipline is. And no, it is not easy. But you're not going to get it from anyone else but you. And it's worth it, and it is the thing that is going to bring you freedom.
That's the key word right there when you said it's worth it. You know what I think? This is what I think. I think like in an environment as like how he put it, an undisciplined environment, right? Or something like that, where he grew up in an undisciplined environment. Obviously that's a very vague expression, right? Like undisciplined environment.
Yeah, that could mean a lot of different things.
A lot of different things. So a lot of times, like when you're brought up in a certain environment, basically you're kind of taught or not taught, like the value of certain things. So if you use like, I don't know, working out or whatever, right? So I'm gonna use myself as an example. My dad was an athlete, not a superior athlete, but he was, he knew like working out was a part of life and stuff like that. And, in elementary school, we're doing sports and stuff like that, Some people, they don't do that at all. So when they grow up into adulthood, some people straight up have never worked out before, never been in the gym. And, so growing up, they were never taught the value of what working out does for you. They're never taught, so they can't appreciate it. They just simply don't know the value. Sure, they see people with, they're in shape or they can do these things and they're very functional, whatever. They see that, of course, but they don't have that value. They don't feel that value. They just never learned it. So it can come off as like this thing for other people, like, oh, that's what other people do kind of thing. So they don't understand the value. So back to the point, in their mind, the connection is not made that it's worth it because they don't know the value of it really. But if you do know the value of it And then you can decide, okay, is this worth it? Is it worth it to wake up every day and quote unquote get after it for this particular goal or this particular set of goals? So that's what it is. And I think, sure, the undisciplined environment can maybe provide that, but I think you're right. I think that once you're like, oh yeah, that's worth it.
Yeah.
You know how people, they'll find reasons when it's worth it, even though they've never experienced, like, you know, like a person who has a heart attack or something is like, and they have kids, young kids or something, they have a heart attack, maybe never worked out ever in their life. They have a heart attack, they almost died. They're like, guess what? I'm working out every single day. I'm a vegetarian now. You know, like doing major changes that they've never even thought about making, and they'll do it because they decided it's worth it. And they'll be disciplined. They'll find that discipline real quick, no matter how they were trained, as, you know, their environment when they were
because now they see that it's going to be worth it.
That's it.
Yeah.
And if it's not worth it to you, and that, I think, is what you develop, the value of working out, the value of.
But you can develop that from anywhere.
That's what I'm saying. That's essentially that's part of the point.
Necessarily develop that from any. You can develop that from anywhere.
Yeah. You can get it from your parents. You can get it from. Yeah, exactly right. But the discipline itself, just like I said, that's gonna come from you. Your parents can teach it, but guess who has to? It's still you. It's still you. And you can go to the military to specifically learn discipline. When you leave,
it's on you.
Yeah, exactly right. And just like I said, like, yeah, I know people who are done with the military and are glad they're done with that.
Right.
They're glad with this waking up early. They're
they fast
done
forward
with
6 months. They're out of shape. They're not doing anything productive. It's horrible to see.
Yeah.
But it happens. Happens with the military. It happens with anything. It happens when kids get out of high school sports. And all of a sudden I don't have to do that anymore.
I don't have to listen to coach.
Yeah.
Crazy time.
Don't listen to coach. Listen to yourself.
Yeah. Determine whether or not it's worth it.
And I'm telling you, you don't need to determine. I'm telling you it's worth it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you it is worth it.
Yeah.
And you know what? You actually know it's worth it. That's why you're asking this question. You know it's worth it. You know it's worth it to have discipline, but you think there's an easier way. Yeah. You think that it's something that people have. You think that when Jocko's alarm clock goes off, it's like, oh, just like my father taught me, I rise and I shine. You know, like, no. It's like the pillow feels soft and comfortable.
Yeah.
And the alarm clock is banging on my head, and I don't like it. But you know what? I know it's worth it to get up and get after it. I know it's worth it, and you know it's worth it.
Here's the thing, though.
We all know it's worth it.
In a way, you're right, but like really, though, really, I'm gonna be open and honest with you. I don't think that people know it's worth it. I think they know it's worth it, like the kind on paper. You know, if they have a multiple choice question, is it worth it? Yes or no? They'll be like, yes. Obviously, I know working out is worth it. But here's the thing: if you don't know, if you don't like having good credit, for example. So I never got taught like why. Really, my mom said, yeah, you should have good credit. That's it. That's the limit to my education on credit, right? So of course I blow it because I fall for literally all the tricks, self-inflicted and otherwise. Credit gets jammed up. So I don't know. I don't know the value. I don't know. I've never experienced the benefits of having good credit. I don't know the value of good credit. So it really didn't mean much to me. Really. My credit was like junk. And I didn't care until I got denied for something. Then I cared, But just like if you're never into working out until you're in a specific situation where it shows.
But like this guy that's asking this question, and I'm glad he's asking the question. I'm not trying to come off all hard. But he realizes the value of discipline because he's saying that he wants it, right? He knows that it's going to make his life better.
Yeah.
And that's why I think he's gotten jammed up in whatever way. We don't know because I don't know him. Maybe he's gotten unhealthy. Maybe he's, who knows? Maybe he's gotten his finances jammed up. Whatever the case may be, he knows that discipline is better for him. He knows that. He does know. This isn't a guy that doesn't know yet. Because sure, there's people that don't. When you're 16 years old, you don't know the value of discipline. You don't know that the way you're acting right now is going to affect you in 5 years. You don't know that you can set your whole life up to be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You don't know that yet. You're just like worried about where you're going on a Friday night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this guy knows. And he wants it. And he's looking for where he can find it. And where he can find it is in the mirror.
Yeah.
That's where it is.
Yep.
So do it, brother. Good luck. Get on the path and stay on the path.
Yeah, and that's going to be beneficial when you do that. I'm harshly maintaining that, like, not knowing the value is a big thing. It's kind of like, okay, so back to my credit thing. There is a point at the end where, okay, so like, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever, I repaired my credit. My credit was repaired. I went through, it was painstaking, not fun stuff.
Yep.
But I did it, got my credit repaired, and now I know the value because as an adult, I'm functioning. It's useful now, So now I know the value of having good credit because I've been through all the things that having good credit brings you through, Now I'm thinking I'll never go back to bad credit.
Right.
Never. It's worth it every single day.
I'm telling you that I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying. I'm saying that this guy knows the value, and that's why he wants it.
Yeah.
It's like when you realize that you got denied for something, and you're like, oh, credit has value. I understand that now.
Yeah.
Something happened in his life where he said discipline has value. I know that now.
Yeah.
But you did credit repair. And what you said was, okay, I need to go out and repair my credit. You didn't say, hey, you know what? My mom didn't tell me about bad credit, and now I have bad credit.
Yeah.
So now what am I supposed to do? You know who repaired your credit? Who repaired your credit?
Well, it was a combination of my wife and I, but
But who repaired your
we
credit?
did it. Yeah, we did that stuff. Yeah.
You took responsibility for it and said, okay, I'm going to get my credit. You
Yeah.
talked to your wife because she's smarter than you. And
Yes.
she was like, hey, I will help this.
Yeah.
But it was you that said, okay, I got to get this fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And you got help. But you knew to reach out for help. But you're the one that ultimately is responsible for it.
Yeah, you're right about that. Like, I didn't blame my parents and then continue having bad credit.
Right. Right.
And, like,
you
that's the
said,
thing.
no, I got to get value. This thing has credit, has value. I need to fix it.
Yeah.
And you fixed it.
Yeah. Regardless of where it came from.
Regardless. So, you don't know.
Hey everybody, my name's Adam from Jamsville.com, and I'm going to be talking about the Locrian mode. So, the Locrian mode is the 7th mode in the major scale. So if you take any major scale and start it from the 7th note, that will give you the Locrian mode. So for example, if we start the C major scale from the 7th note in the scale, which is B, that will give us B Locrian. Locrian is an extremely dark and spooky mode, which you'll hear in just a second when you listen to my improvisation on the Locrian mode. So Locrian is what we get when we start a major scale from the 7th degree, but it can also be thought of as a major scale with a flat 2, flat 3, flat 5, flat 6, and flat 7. So the 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7 are all lowered by a half step in relation to a regular major scale. Out of all the notes in the Locrian mode, I would say the flat 2 and the flat 5 are the most distinctive ones that indicate to us that we are in fact playing that Locrian sound. So what you're about to hear is me playing on the C Locrian mode, which is basically the same thing as taking a D flat major scale and starting it from C. So C Locrian sounds like this. And now check it out in context.
I've worked with a lot of students that already know about the modes of the major scale, but they're having trouble figuring out why did they learn the modes of the major scale. What's the point and what are you supposed to do with these? So that's really what I want to tackle in this video, and I'm going to demonstrate to you each mode, what's the point of each mode? How does it feel? What does it do? And in my opinion, this is extremely important. It gives you freedom and it gives you options as a lead guitar player to really color the tone of what you're playing over. You're not just stuck to sounding bluesy with pentatonic minor or sounding happy with major. You really get some options here and some really cool options. Each one of these modes has its own unique identity and its own unique flair, and being able to access that whenever you want as a lead player or as a composer, I feel is invaluable. So with just a little bit of work with our modes, we should be able to kind of harness that energy and apply it where we need. In order to do that though, we will need to have a little bit of theory under our belts. So in this video, I'm going to start off with a little light theory on how the modes are built. Then I'll demonstrate to you each mode one at a time so you can really get a grasp of how it feels and how to identify it. Then afterward, we'll talk a little bit of the heavier music theory that goes along with playing modes like we will be playing them in this video, okay? So to get started, we really want to know what are the modes of the major scale, and here's how I want you to think about it. There's a lot of ways to think about it, but essentially I could make a major scale by following this sequence of half steps and whole steps. A half step is just one fret or one note, and a whole step is two frets or two notes. So I want to start on G, okay? I'll be playing in G everything today. I'll be in G major, G Lydian, G everything. So I'm going to start on G, that's my root, and if I do travel a whole step, another whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and a half step, it gives me my G major scale, also known as G Ionian. Now, if I want the second mode of the major scale, all I have to do is offset this pattern of half steps and whole steps by 1. And by doing that, it will give me a whole different sequence of half steps and whole steps and a whole different sequence of notes, all right? To get the third mode of the major scale, all I would do is the same thing, just offset it by 1, and I get a whole different sequence of notes. Keep going through this. You'll have all 7 modes, and you'll notice they all start on G. Today I'm setting them all up on G so you can see the differences between them. Now, if you pay close attention, you'll see that 6 of these modes contain the notes G and D. And the jam track I'll be playing over is just those 2 notes. It's just a G power chord, G and D, which means that I can play any of these modes over my jam track. However, I cannot play the Locrian mode over this jam track, and you probably see why. In my Locrian mode, I only have a D flat. I do not have a D note to play. Now, Locrian is its own beast, but there's a lot to talk about regarding Locrian because it's kind of the odd man out in this situation, all right? So now that we have all of the 7 modes there, what's important to know is what is the tonic chord in each of these modes? What is the home bass chord in each of these keys? And it might seem obvious, but you just kind of have to look in G major, for example, the first mode of the major scale, G Ionian. All we have to do to figure out the tonic chord is just look at the first note, the second note, the first note, the third note, and the 5th note. By looking at 1, 3, and 5, it'll tell you the notes of my tonic chord. That is G, B, D. And if I play G's, B's, and D's, it's a G major chord. So my tonic chord of G major is the G major chord. However, look at my second mode, all right, Dorian. You can see that if I look at the first note, the third note, and the 5th note, I actually get G, B flat, and D, which means the home chord of G Dorian would be a G minor chord, all right? That's important. As I'm going to be soloing and showing you these modes, I'm going to be outlining the tonic chord with my lead guitar. I'm not just going to be playing up and down the scale. I'm going to try to highlight the notes of the tonic chord to help really fill in the context of what key I'm in. Okay, and that's really important, is knowing that each one of these modes has a home chord that you want to focus on. And as you can see, the home chord of major, Lydian, and Mixolydian is a major chord. The home chord of Dorian, Phrygian, and minor is a minor chord. And once again, we have the odd man out. The tonic chord of Locrian is going to be a diminished triad. So you might be able to guess it's not going to be very harmonic if you're spending the whole time hanging out on a diminished triad, which kind of, you might be getting the problem with Locrian already. But we'll talk about that later. Now that we have an idea of the theory behind how I'm building these things up, all starting them from the same root, all starting them on G, it's time to actually show you what these things sound like. So once again, my jam track is just playing G and D. That's a G power chord. And I want to go through each one of these scales. I'll go up the scale, and then I'll do a little bit of improvising so you can actually hear the tone and the color develop for each one of these modes. All right? Let's start off with major. You might be able to hear major is very happy. It's very bright. It's almost sickeningly happy. I think of classical music. I think of health insurance commercials. Anything that's supposed to make you feel elated and overjoyed. Major, it gets kind of bland, and it takes some work to really sound interesting with major if you're trying to avoid that really sweet saccharine sound. However, if you're looking for nice big melodies and really singable choruses, you're never going to go wrong with major. But you've heard major before, so let's go on to something a little bit more distinct, and that would be the Dorian scale. Let's take a listen to that one. So Dorian's kind of weird, right? It's not really evil and dark like a minor scale. It's kind of got this kind of smooth, silky. I always think of Carlos Santana. Carlos Santana's jams and songs, a lot of them are in Dorian. And they're minor because they're, cool and dark. They're not overjoyed, but they've got a little bit of flair to it, a little bit of bite, a little bit of spice put into that minor. It's not just a dark and depressing and rocking minor. It's got a little bit more pep to it. So I have to point out that the real important note in Dorian is that natural sixth note. Normally in a minor scale, I'd have a flat six, but in Dorian it's a natural six, and it gives it that major lift. It gives it that little brightness that we don't expect. And when I'm improvising in Dorian, I try to make it a point to get back to that note at just the right times to remind people, hey, I'm not in minor, I'm in Dorian, and it kind of brightens things up a little bit. So let's move on to Phrygian. So that is pretty interesting. You can hear Phrygian's got a very exotic flavor to it, like a Middle Eastern, foreign flavor to it. And that's really potent. My jam track used to be this bland, boring, two-note thing, but now the jam track itself actually feels dark and deep and kind of mysterious, right? And that's because the Phrygian mode has colored your ear. I've outlined the notes of that minor chord, the G minor chord, and I have this note, which is a flat 2. I have an A flat in there, so these two notes right next to each other give you a really, really dark flavor, right? So, cool option for soloing over just one note or just a power chord is the Phrygian choice. And really the note you would want to be highlighting there is that flat 2. So, going back to something with a major tonality, let's take a look at the Lydian mode. I'll admit this is my favorite mode. It's very dreamy, disoriented, disconnected, floaty, and that comes from the fact that we have a major triad, a G, a B, and a D. That's our tonic chord. But we also have a tritone, which is a sharped 4 or a diminished 5. And just that combination of notes gives you a very sci-fi, kind of otherworldly feel. So anytime I'm trying to access that kind of emotion, I know that Lydian is a good place to start. Let's take a look at the next one with major tonality. That would be Mixolydian. I do love Mixolydian. It's like major, but it's kind of watered down. It doesn't have that sickening sweetness of major. It's much more palatable, and it's way more fun and rocking, and almost like an Irish flair to it. I found out just this week that the bagpipes are actually tuned to a natural Mixolydian scale. So it makes sense that it reminds me of Irish music because I've heard it so much in traditional bagpipe music. So the Mixolydian scale is pretty much the same thing as a major scale. We've just flattened that 7th note, and that takes away the leading tone of major, right? And that was the leading tone right there. It really pulls us to a root. Now we have a flat 7, which gives us kind of a more, unexpected feeling, right? And it definitely dilutes the happiness of my major scale. So once again, a very cool option if you're stuck with just jamming over a power chord. If major's sounding too bright and happy, just try bringing in that mixolydian scale instead, and you'll get something with a little bit more upbeat attitude, and it's still bright and happy, but just not dripping with emotion, you know? All right, now let's take a look at the natural minor or Aeolian mode. So you've probably heard stuff like this before. This is the foundation of most of our rock and roll music. It's kind of traditional at this point. I can't really put my finger on it other than it's dark, but it's important to be able to contrast minor with Dorian. What's the difference between those two? Well, I think minor is darker. I think it's sadder. I think Dorian has a little bit more optimism to it. What's the difference between minor and Phrygian? Well, that should be obvious. Phrygian has a real distinct exotic flair. That flat 2 is extremely dark. And I think it's much darker than minor. So hopefully those kind of words, dark and light, I mean, I know they're not physical things, but they're the words that pop into my head when I try to compare something like Phrygian to minor. If my guitar player was jamming over a G power chord, and if I wanted to have an exotic flair, I know that Phrygian would be a better choice than minor. Now, lastly, let's talk about Locrian. Here's the problem. If I want to jam in Locrian, I'd need to be jamming on the home chord of Locrian, which would be G diminished. And hanging out on a diminished chord and pretending like that's going to be your home doesn't usually work out that well. You could do it as an academic thing, right? Just try to write something in Locrian, but without a root and a fifth, you know, a root and a fifth, those are like the 2 pillars of foundation for any chord. So now we're just left with this, a root and a flatted fifth. And this is not stable. So doing anything in Locrian is just going to give you something weird. And what's worse is it's not even that weird. There's better weird scales. If you're looking to sound atonal and chaotic, I think there's better choices than just Locrian. So to me, Locrian is like the remainder. It's the leftover stuff from all these awesome modes. You know, you got to have that leftover bad stuff. And to me, that's Locrian. That might not be fair to describe the Locrian mode that way, but I'll be completely honest with you. I haven't found any use for it other than to just goof around with it. And even then, like I said, if I want to sound goofy and chaotic, I would rather pick something like whole tone or an octatonic scale or some weird exotic scale like that. So I hope this gives you a little insight into why you might want to learn your modes. You can see, I mean, over one jam track, I'm able to sound 6 different ways. But having access to that means that when I'm composing or when I'm improvising, I have more than just a few choices. And I think that's really important as a musician. Also, it is worth talking about a few other concepts that kind of dovetail into what we did here. You might hear the word modal interchange or the word modal mixture. Essentially, that's what we were doing in this video. We had one tonic, we had G the entire time. And throughout this video, I was in G major, then I was in G Dorian, and G Lydian, and G mixolydian. Often when you're writing chord changes that borrow from the different parallel modes, then you call that modal mixture or modal interchange. Some people might debate whether this is modal interchange because I didn't include any chords. There was just one, power chord the entire time. But the scales I'm playing are implying different chord tones, which kind of creates that feeling of modal mixture. Also, if you look at all the different modes I played, it contained all 12 different notes of the chromatic scale. And this can be thought of as polymodal chromaticism, accessing all 12 notes by changing parallel modes across one tonic. And this idea is very closely related to what you might hear as pitch axis theory, which is the idea of having a stable tonic, like G in our case, and using different chord tones to kind of launch us into different modes. For example, if I had a G major chord with a sharp 4, well, I've got my G major triad and I have a sharp 4, all of those notes are in G Lydian, so this would be kind of a launching board to play in the G Lydian key. Likewise, if I all of a sudden played a G minor 7 chord, all of those notes are in G Dorian or in G minor. So I could use a G minor 7 chord to kind of spring into that new mode. The whole idea of pitch axis theory, though, is that you are rotating on one tonic, just like in this video. So I really hope this clears some things up for you and maybe gives you some inspiration on your own lead writing and your own songwriting as to how to utilize this stuff. It's really important to learn music theory, in my opinion, but it's really important to be able to use it. This stuff isn't for factoids or for trivia. It's not something you recite, just for the sake of having the knowledge. It's ways of describing things that work. And as you can hear, all those things work. And music theory is just giving me a label to remember how it worked and how I can recreate it again. So I hope you learned something from this, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do like this video, please like, subscribe. You know what to do. And I will see you in the not-so-distant future.
And now we enter the water. And starting us off, we've got this selection of odd time signatures. As the name would suggest, these time signatures are odd, they're unusual. But because of that, they have a really intriguing quality, a really unusual sound to the Western listener. Diatonic modes is what you'll think of as just modes. Mixolydian, Dorian, Lydian, all of those common modes you hear about. A mode is when you take the notes of a scale, but then you treat a different note as the root point, as the starting point. So for example, G Mixolydian is C major, but treating G as the root note. They're called diatonic modes here because they're referring to the modes of the major scale. Modal interchange is obviously related to modes. It's when in a piece of music you might switch between using different parallel modes.
So what, did you play sports all through high school?
I did soccer.
What did you end up excelling at? Any of them?
I was a varsity soccer player, defender, because I didn't have good ball skills. Even as a freshman, I didn't always start. I was more of a bench rider, but I did earn a varsity letter as a freshman, and it started starting as a sophomore, and then was a varsity player all 4 years. My last semester as a senior spring, I knew I was going to the Naval Academy. And we can get into the reasons of why I wanted to go there, but I knew I was going, and so I decided to join the track team, distance running. I thought I got to show up to the academy ready to go, ready to bust out a 1.5 mile run. Track had a 2 mile event, a 1 mile event. So I signed up, and it turns out in soccer I was really good at running, but not so much kicking the ball or passing it. As a defender, I just try to kick the ball to one of my teammates who could actually do something with it. But in track, I was pretty good for one season track athlete. I ended up running a sub 5 minute mile, had a 10:30 2 mile. And so I thought endurance sports could have been my thing. I just wasn't exposed to it earlier. I certainly wasn't exposed to cross country skiing as a kid from a farm in Kansas.
So you end up going to the Naval Academy. How did you get interested in going to the Naval Academy?
Well, I don't want to say that my father pushed me in that direction, in no way whatsoever. He wrote me a letter when I did get into the Naval Academy, and he said that his childhood dream was to go to the Naval Academy, but he didn't have the grades and didn't even apply. But I didn't choose to go to the military in the sense of it feeling like a decision. It just felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. It really did. I wanted to be a Marine.
Did you apply to West Point too?
I
or
did.
The Air
That
Force
was my
Academy?
West Point was my backup plan.
Oh,
I got into the best one, the Naval Academy. So I just wanted to combine military service with continuing my education, and I felt like as an officer I would have leadership responsibilities, and this would be, I had read books. Vietnam still fascinates me, and probably a large part of this is due to my father having been in the Vietnam War. I would read anything I could get my hands on about special operations in Vietnam, infantry platoons, Marine Corps. I was very, very much keen on infantry, small unit tactics. I ended up signing up for the local U.S. Naval Sea Cadets program there was a Naval Reserve unit in Topeka, Kansas. You drive there, and it was kind of modeled after reserves. 1 weekend a month, you show up and you drill. In the summers between your academic years of high school, you get Navy training. It starts with boot camp in Great Lakes. So I went to Great Lakes the summer before my junior year of high school for 2 weeks.
How old were you?
I was 15,
Okay, it's only 2
15,
weeks.
16. Yeah, 2 weeeks. Not an actual boot camp, but it's very much you're in Great Lakes, you're wearing dungarees, you're marching around, you're getting yelled at. I'm just in high school. I don't remember ever signing a waiver. But they had this training called SEAL training. I had to do one other training before that. So after that summer of going to Great Lakes for boot camp, I went to amphibious school in Virginia. And again, I'm 15 or 16. Because I had to knock out one of these before I could be eligible for SEAL training. Now, in order to go to this SEAL camp, which is going to be the following year that I would be eligible, the summer before my senior year, I'd have to take the BUDS physical fitness test, 500-yard side stroke and push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and 1.5-mile run. So I started training for it, and I was horrible at swimming, just horrible. But I somehow got under the 12-minute time or whatever, the cutoff, barely. And so they put me out to Virginia Beach, Little Creek, for this 2-week camp. And it starts with
What year is this?
This would have been 1997. So this is actually run by active duty team guys, putting these high school kids through this washed down version of Hell Week. We had a Hell Night. It started off, and I remember that was it was a 24-hour thing. Started sometime in the day, ends sometime the next day. Go through the night, running with boats on your head. And I remember at one point running with a boat on my head. I was on the left side of the boat, and an active duty Navy SEAL is just yelling at me because
Do you remember who it was, buddy?
I don't. I remember there was a Chief Blackburn, and the particular individual in this story is not Chief Blackburn. I was slacking off, and he just laid into me about how I wasn't being a good teammate, and I'll never forget that. It just cut right into me, and I came back. After that, we got to shoot MP5s. We got to do the water obstacle course in Virginia Beach. And it's just, as a high school kid, I mean, this is amazing. But truth be told, I didn't have perfect eyesight, and I just was horrible in the water. So when I did get into the Naval Academy, my preference was for the Marine Corps.
So, all that Hoo-yah SEAL stuff didn't get you, totally brainwashed? I was brainwashed just sitting over here listening to you tell that. If I would have been 15, it would have been a done deal.
It was, but I just didn't think.
How bad was your
I
eyesight?
had a chance. It needed to be correct. It wasn't within 2040. Certainly wasn't 2020. At this point, I didn't know about corrective surgery. That wasn't even a thing. At the Naval Academy, I thought I can go in the Marine Corps infantry, be a platoon leader or company commander, and so that's what I was leaning towards. I mean, absolutely though. When I went to the Naval Academy, the SEAL program was extremely intriguing to me. I just didn't think I would be eligible. Why would you set yourself up just to be disappointed?
Check. So, anything else from high school before you roll out? How hard was it to get all the congressional recommendation and all that stuff?
I don't think it's that hard when you're applying to the Naval Academy from Kansas. Now, it may be different now, but if I was applying in Virginia or California or Texas, Maryland, Virginia, the geographically proximate states, they're very competitive. But I had good grades. One thing I should say is by the time I was a freshman in high school, I was fortunate enough to have this goal of the Naval Academy inside me. I don't know how it got there, but it was there. And so it then becomes a matter of, well, what do I need to do to get into this place? It's going to be really hard. Okay, you got to have good grades. Check. I'll study and get good grades. You got to demonstrate some athletic talent. Okay, well, I'm already doing that. That was easy for me. Leadership. Okay, well, I'll try to be a sports team captain. I'll try to run for student government. I'll do the Sea Cadets. And that's kind of how I structured it. And so I think as my story unfolds, you'll see I tend to be a fairly goal-oriented person, but this is something I think it's very important, but not to force the goals. But when I have these goals naturally, I feel like I can just be ignited because this is driving me forward. And that's what was happening as early as my freshman year. And that's why I think I'm very fortunate, because if you make this decision, you want to go to a service academy in your senior year of high school, it's too late. You got to start the process in your junior year. You do have to get a nomination from either senator in your state or from your congressional representative. And they're in communication with the academies, and I think the academies kind of lean them towards the candidates that they are already identifying.
And you have where did you hear about the Naval Academy for the first time? You don't remember?
It had to have been in a book. I mean, I remember watching movies like Predator and just
How come Echo didn't end up at the Naval Academy? He was watching Predator a lot more than you were.
Oh yeah, probably was reading some books on a platoon leader in the Marine Corps in Vietnam or something. Naval Academy. I think how it actually happened was at one point I wanted to be a pilot, but then the eyesight thing. It's not happening. But to be a pilot, I mean, you start getting aware of the service academy, because to be a pilot, you have to go to a commissioning source. Yeah.
So when you show up at the Naval Academy for like plebe summer, you must be pretty used to this kind of crap, because you've already been to boot camp. Had a bunch of team guys at Virginia Beach were freaking crushing you.
It really was not that big of a deal. And plebe summer is this 6-week indoctrination. It is not boot camp, but it is a service academy equivalent of boot camp. Your class of about 1,200 incoming freshmen report in the middle of the summer, July, for about a 6-week indoctrination into the military that occurs and ends before the academic year. And on the note of the Sea Cadets, I will say that at the end of my plebe year, freshman year at the Naval Academy, I was invited back to be the class leader. And I did do that, and that was just an awesome leadership opportunity. I could be the class leader.
Class leader of what?
Of the incoming Sea Cadet class of high school students. So as a now done with my plebe year at the Naval Academy, I'm the class OIC of this group of high school kids coming from all over the place, running through the same thing I had been through 2 years before at this point, because the other summer was plebe summer.
And how did you like the Naval Academy?
Well, it was...
It's like a love-hate relationship, right?
Yeah, there's this saying, IHTFP, I hate this place. But, in high school, I had friends, but I didn't have what I would call deep connections with the people that I was going to high school with. And I definitely had friends, but when I was in the Naval Academy for the first time, I'm finding people that I really see eye to eye with. I mean, really quite bonded in this way of looking at the world the same way. Like, just common interest, common personality, this kind of thing, but to a person. And we found each other. Weren't in the same companies. They all wanted to be selected for SEAL training, all of them. What was that telling me? A couple of these individuals were recruited swimmers, all-American high school swimmers. Now they're varsity swimmers as freshmen at the Naval Academy. Two were really good boxers, and I found that out the hard way, trying to spar with them a little bit in the ring. And then, there was me, a farm kid from Kansas, and I just was not comfortable in the water. The truth of it is, in plebe summer, I excelled physically in anything that was on land, but anytime we had to do something in the water, and this is maybe 2 times a week, you have to demonstrate to the Navy that you can float, that you can take off your camis, camouflage uniform when you're floating, and tie them and inflate them to help you float. Mm-hmm. You have to demonstrate that in the event that you fall off a ship, that you're not a total liability, that you can swim from one side of the pool to the other. This is what you're doing in plebe summer. And on those particular days, we're marching, it's hot out, I would have knots of anxiety in my stomach. Palpable.
Were you scared of failing, or were you scared of drowning?
I was scared of the water. I just didn't have a lot of exposure. Now, granted, I'd gone to this Sea Cadet SEAL thing, but there was a little bit in the water, and that stuff petrified me. So, I mean, and given what I ended up doing, one could call into question my career decision-making skills, given that this reality when I went to the Naval Academy. I was just very, very scared of the water. But by the end of this first year, I had met my circle of friends. They all wanted to, pretty much to a person, wanted to be selected for SEAL training. And so...
Are these guys all in your same class?
Same class, so we're plebes, freshmen.
And they're just down for the SEALs.
Yeah.
And how long did it take for you to start thinking that in that direction as well?
I would say by the end of my first year there, I no longer wanted to be a Marine, and I wanted to be selected for a SEAL program. But I knew that I needed to get in the water and start training, get better at swimming.
What about your eyesight? Had you now learned that you could get corrective surgery?
That year's class, 1999, was able to get PRK. So that was a game changer for me. And then it's like, okay, well.
So you weren't the class of 1999.
No, I was class of 2002. So that in the...
So you watched the guys that were going to graduate in 1999, or that had graduated in 1999.
Yes, and who are going to BUDS. And for those listening, there are, at the time, 16 billets from the Naval Academy graduating class to go to BUDS, SEAL training. And those billets are split over multiple classes, but 16 graduate and get to go to BUDS. And that service selection happens around January of your senior year. So as a freshman in January, I'm seeing who gets picked. And I had just heard that some of these individuals had PRK to correct their vision, so that they may have had that done a year before or something. But that this is a game changer for me. I just need to get better in the water, because I was awful. In addition to being scared of the water, borderline scared, just could not swim.
So do you start spending extra time in the pool? Does someone grab you and coach you and mentor you? Like, how do you start getting through this?
Well, I had a good buddy who became a team guy, and we just started training together. And I would figure it out myself. You know, we work on john proofing. We'd work on swimming underwater, 25 meters, something like that. Working on the stroke. I also had this goal of trying to make the triathlon team, because that year, the senior class, out of those 16 billets going to BUDS, I want to say 5 came from the triathlon team. So, well, that's a team that could be good to make. It's not a varsity sport, so therefore, you don't have to be recruited. It's a club sport. Let's get in the water and start training. And I was always a very good runner and good at cycling, so I thought I'll train for triathlon. And along with my friend, we started training. We would just go on these adventures, running or cycling with our fins strapped to a backpack out to Bay Ridge or into the Chesapeake, and just then go fin swim in cold water, come back, get on the bike or run back to the academy. Just doing fun adventures like that, and it just started pushing my limits.
What were you majoring? What did you major in?
I chose to major in English. The service academies are geared towards science and engineering, and they said plebe year chemistry is a good identifier of whether you will do well in engineering and science if you want to major. And they call it group 1, and then group 3 is more the humanities. First semester chemistry, no problem. It was a repeat of my high school. But second semester chemistry was new stuff. It just was over my head. And so I thought, I had a very influential English teacher in high school, Mr. Schultz. And in addition to my parents really exposing me to reading and just, I still love to read. I read a lot. This teacher really inspired me to want to be an English major. If this is what you like to do it. And there's benefit from this. I thought you learn about people, you learn about situations, you develop an ability to empathize, or hopefully, with other people, and communication skills as well. This is all very important in the military.
So you decide that you're going to study English while you're at the Naval Academy.
Correct. And
are they, like, what part of English are you studying? Like, I mean, that just seems kind of strange.
It's English lit. It just was called English there, but it really it's not. I mean, I think they had some writing classes or creative writing, this kind of thing, but really it's the study of literature. And my favorite class was a class on Hemingway. And as a kid, I had read Hemingway, and I read A Farewell to Arms, For Whom the Bell Tolls. And these are books very much about war and the wartime experience.
So as you're going through, at what point are you starting to compete and you're starting to look at, hey, how am I actually going to get selected? Because, you say there's 16 billets, and that it's as competitive as it gets to get one of those 16 billets. What do you think you did that was able to make you stand out and actually get selected?
I remember plebe year, we were in an auditorium. I think this is during plebe summer when the whole class, 1,200 people, is assembled, and they're saying, "Who wants to be an aviator?" 600 hands go up. Who wants to be on a ship?
600 out of roughly 1,200.
1,200. You know,
Okay.
I'm estimating.
Right.
Who wants to be on a ship? And a few hundred. Who wants to be a Navy SEAL? And 200, 150 hands go up, easy. But by the time it comes around to the junior year, we really got to start making things happen. I feel like there were maybe 60 or 70 in my class that were kind of very much gunning for this. You have to do a screener weekend in order to get ready for Mini Buds. Mini Buds is a 3-week program prior to your senior academic year. So you'd go there to Coronado.
Did you go to Mini Buds?
I did. I had to do the screener weekend in the fall of my junior year. And in that, you're ranked based on a PFT, physical fitness test.
Bloody scrake! That's 1/6 Zed right there. Who is this mysterious marksman? Lovely.
Spend freely. Things are about to get serious. Remember, when a flesh pound is enraged, it can kick like a mule.
You go through about 2 days of just hazing, essentially, from the seniors, the upper class, who have gone to mini buds, as if that really qualifies them to do that. But and then from that, if you survive,
Most badass instructor, they've been to mini buds.
yeah. But at the time, you know, you're revering they've been to mini buds, and some of them are going to go to buds. And if you get through all this, then you can go to mini buds, and then ostensibly you're ranked out of that, and then it goes into your senior year. You do another fitness test that gets ranked. You do a peer evaluation. We evaluate who do you want to go to buds with, who do you not want to go to buds
So
with.
you got selected to go to mini buds.
I did. Yep.
And how was mini buds?
Yeah, I did well.
It's 3 weeks long.
Yeah, this is my first time going to Coronado, California, and I fell in love with the place. Being from Kansas, I was just like, this is awesome. We had the weekends off. I think we did a Hell Night, very similar to the Sea Cadet thing I did, except now it's in Coronado as opposed to Little Creek, Virginia. And then it was just exposure. You know, in high school, I'd been shooting they let us shoot MP5s. And I don't think we even got to do anything that cool in mini buds. I think some of it was just going out to La Posta and doing some land navigation in the heat. But it was just a really good time with my buddies from the Naval Academy. And then after that, I got to go to Navy Dive School because I had done a screener for that. And that's in Panama City, Florida. And I think that really was helpful for me, given my insecurities in the water, to go to dive school 5 weeks in Panama City, Florida, learning how to dive twin 80s.
How long was it? 5 weeks?
It was 5 weeks. So that summer before my senior year, it was just, for me, it was just the best summer. Mini buds for 3 weeks, dive school for 5 weeks, come back for senior year with a dive bubble. Not that's, I mean, just in the school, like, that's kind of a big deal to have a dive bubble.
Oh, you were kind of a badass then. And you get done with all that, and now this is like September 2001, right? This is like September 11th, 2001. It's going to go down right before or as you start your senior year.
Yeah, I remember September. I'll never forget that day. I had a late morning class, and I went out for a run that morning, and outside of the campus, outside of the yard. And as a senior, you're allowed to do that. I came back to the gate, and they wouldn't let me in. I didn't have my ID. You don't need to run with an ID. Why are they asking for my ID? And then I came to find out what had happened. I went back to the dorm where we all live. I changed into my uniform, went to class, and you're seeing the replays. I didn't see it live, but things totally changed. I mean, that day, the academy was on lockdown. We didn't know what was happening. We had heard the Pentagon had been attacked. Of course, the towers in New York. And for me, this really drove home this reality. If I get selected for SEAL training, and I'm not going to know until January, I'm going to be directly involved in the nation's response to this. This is for real. It's now we're at war. And there's a decision that anybody wanting to go to BUDS has to make. It's this decision of what are you going to put as your second choice. And the theory amongst the majority of my friends, in fact, I think all of them, was, well, if you want to demonstrate that you want to be a SEAL, you need to put ships as number 2, because that's the best way to laterally transfer. You're going to have to go to Newport, Rhode Island for surface warfare officer school. You'll do a tour in the fleet, and then you can put in your package and you can come to BUDS 2 years later. For me, I was thinking about this long and hard. Because you're trying to game, you want to get one of those billets, but you don't know if you will. It's very competitive. At this point, there's probably 45 guys that are up for this.
And these guys are like varsity wrestlers, varsity swimmers,
Yeah,
you know,
water polo
badasses.
Yeah.
They're destroying the PST. They got a 4.0 GPA. It's like just studs.
Yeah. So for me, I thought about this, and I put the Marine Corps as number 2. You have to go into an interview board, and this happens in the fall. And this board was happening after 9/11, and it's comprised of senior SEAL officers, middle range SEAL officers, a couple lieutenants at the academy at the time, and then some senior enlisted SEALs. So this is intimidating. It's a panel of maybe 8 to 10 team guy officers and enlisted that, you know, you don't see a lot of tridents at the academy. So when you do, it's just intimidating.
Dude, when I went to boot camp, there was one SEAL there. And like, I saw him years later, like probably two or 3 years later. He had gotten out and was coming back in, and so he was at boot camp, like going through some basic like wickets to get reinstated in the Navy, and he had a trident, and you know, I was like, oh my God, it's a freaking real SEAL. And when I met him years later, totally good dude, but if you would have asked me what was the height and approximate weight of this guy that you saw that was a SEAL in boot camp, I would have said, oh, he was probably, let's call it probably 6'5", 260. Because that's what in my mind, that's what he was. And I met him in real life, and he was like 5'11", you know, 190, you know, and that's legit. Like, I legitimately thought that he was like that badass. And I was young, I mean, but still, that when you're young and you see that freaking chicken for the first time, you're like, oh damn, so you're going to this board with 8 of these dudes.
Yeah, in the highest ranking officers in 06, a SEAL captain, and I don't know anything about the ins and outs of the SEAL teams, but this is intimidating. And everything seems to, you know, depend upon my performance right here, right now, in front of these people. And so I just remember standing outside the room. The guy in front of me is in there. You know, he comes out, and I'm like, how was it? You know, he's like shaking his head, like it's tough. So I go in there, and you know, they asked me. I think they were leading me down. So why are you an English major? Do you write? Do you like poetry? Do you write poems? And I'm trying to say, well, sir, this is about it's about learning of other people and understanding situations and developing communication skills, and I think that'll serve me really well in the community if I have the honor of being selected. Then they said, your second choice, you're not putting down service warfare. What's going on with that? And I said, well, we're at war. I'd rather be in the Marine Corps if I can't go to BUDS. I'd rather lead an infantry platoon. At the time, I didn't know. I think looking back, that's probably the right answer. Yeah. And I really did. I don't know if the Marines would have taken me. The rumor also was, you put them as second, they're not gonna take you.
I've heard that's like a real catch-22 for guys at the academy, because they want to go in the SEAL teams, but there's so few billets. But if you put Marine Corps as number 2, the Marines are like, are you kidding me? The Marine Corps should be number 1 later. Mm-hmm. So that's a bummer. But I've heard that as well.
Yeah, and truth be told, I think I'm not going to game this. I'm just going to rank my choices. And honestly, there's a lot of things I'd rather do than be on a ship. And so I'm either going to make it or not into BUDS, and maybe the Marines will take me, maybe they won't. But I remember exiting the interview thinking, I have no idea how that went. It felt like it was forever, but it was probably half an hour.
And dude, you know nothing. I'm just sitting here like laughing. Dude, you know nothing about anything.
I know they were in retrospect, they probably knew the people they wanted, and maybe a couple were on the fence. I don't know where I stacked in there, but they probably were just screwing with it. They probably laugh after you leave. They're probably.
Did you meet any of these guys later in the teams?
Absolutely, yeah.
Did they debrief you at all? Did they even remember you?
The company officer at the academy was there, and you know, he's still in, and you know, I have not asked him specifically about that, but I was ranked fine. I found out afterwards.
So you were ranked fine. You find out in January. That's when you find out where you're going?
Yes. There's a day called Service Selection Day. You're going to go into your company officer's room. Every company, there are 30 companies at the academy. Every company is comprised of all 4 years. in that company has a company officer from either the active duty Navy or Marine Corps, and then a company senior enlisted from the Navy or Marine Corps. So you go into the company officer's office, and he's or she is going to tell you what you've been assigned, and this is your fate. You don't get to, this is what you're doing.
There's not a debate.
No, you don't get to say, well, this or that. And if you're assigned to a ship, later that night, you get to choose, and it's somewhat of a lottery system. I think it actually depends on class rank. You can choose what ship you want to go on, but you don't get to contest the fact that you were assigned surface warfare.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in there, and he's printing off a certificate that's going to tell me my fate, and his back is to me. I just remember, it's just, my heart is pounding.
What did you think your chances were?
At the time, I thought about 50-50.
50-50. Check.
So I go in there, and the first thing he said was, "Don't worry, you're fine." And I'm like, well, what does that mean? You got what you wanted. I'm like, so I remember just feeling absolute relief, and then about maybe 5 minutes later, it was like, I'm going to Buds. Whoa. And now I'm already starting to feel this apprehension, because Hell Week. Second phase, with water. I gotta get ready.
How many of your buddies didn't get picked up? Like, of your good buddies?
One of my...
And how was that whole freaking relationship thing? Because there's like two guys that were like faster than you, and there was another guy that was smarter than you, and another guy that was like a better wrestler, and you're just going, sheesh.
Yeah, by and large, most of my best friends got a billet, but one of my best friends did not, and one of my other buddies who did, the guy that I was going on the adventures with, we came up to his room later that day, and he started crying in front of us. I won't forget that either. We all wanted this so bad, but I think it was more than necessarily the job. It was, this is what your buddies are doing. You want to be with your teammates. Sure. It's so, yeah, it's a challenge, and you're intrigued by that, but it's about teamwork. And he was crying, and man, I felt bad for him. And going on to Buds, wanting to stay in touch with him, not knowing how to navigate, how much do I tell about what I'm doing, or do I try to protect his feelings and not really, it's this or that or whatever. But I am proud to say that later on, when I went to a team, another friend of mine, we spoke to the commanding officer, and who apparently had good rapport with the detailer, and we said, there's this guy. It's the individual who did not get the billet that year, and he was able to lateral transfer, and he is the commanding officer of
a team
right now.
That's freaking
which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I was tasking a bruiser, Stoner and Leif, both those guys didn't get picked up out of the academy, and they both had to go to the fleet and do the whole lat transfer thing. And, it's all just, man, like you said, it's your fate is in the hands of all these different things, and you can push it. And that's a great story. It's a great story when guys actually stick with it and go to the fleet and do that lateral transfer thing. That's a game I'm glad I didn't have to play.
Yeah, in many ways you were smart. But I will say, I remember there was, in the plebe year, the individual who did not get the bill, who is now doing quite well in the teams, who he, in freshman year, we were talking about, what are you going to decide for your major? You don't have to declare until the springtime. I was like, I'm going to do English, and he goes, I'm thinking computer science. And so he chose computer science, and his grades were not the best. And so for me, English was such a good choice.
Clutch choice.
I happen to be someone who likes to read, and I can maybe not always read all of the book, but still write a decent paper, focus on my math and science and engineering classes to try to get at least a B in those classes to try to have good grades, because they are evaluating everything, and part of that is your grades.
So September 11th goes down, you get picked up, you're in your final prep. You must have been feeling decent about the water now that you passed Navy dive school.
Yes, I'm much more confident in the water. I felt like I had improved a lot, and I knew that anything on land, I'm going to be, just given the perspective of of being borderline afraid of the water, that I could use this to my advantage. I've overcome a fear. I'm used to being afraid of the water. There's actually a strength in that. Learning how to overcome something. What I did was I walked up to the water's edge just about every day there at the academy for 4 years and literally immersed myself in this environment that I am uncomfortable in. And come to find later, I had a distinct apprehension of jumping out of airplanes as well. And so SEAL stands for sea, air, and land. Sea and air were not my thing. But the processes of overcoming this fear of the water I think have served me quite well. And so there's this, I think, inner strength that can come from approaching situations that make you uncomfortable. You get through this. You take it one small step at a time. Work on something. There's always something you can work on. Do one thing today. Do another thing tomorrow. Over time, this will accumulate and grow.
Yeah, I've thought about that too. Like, you're jumping out of airplanes, you're fast roping, you're rappelling, you're diving at night. All these things that are a little bit sketchy if you're not comfortable with them. And look, the first time you jump out of an airplane, even if, like, for me, I thought it was going to be fun, but it's still a little bit sketchy. First time I fast rope, like, hey, this seems like it's going to be fun, but it's still a little bit sketchy. First time you rappel off the tower, seems like it's going to be fun, but it's still a little bit sketchy. Well, you're building up sort of the mental protocol to be in a fearful situation and just like proceed anyways, which I think is really good for the first time you're going into combat. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I know those little butterflies, no factor, I'm going to push through them. That's probably a pretty good reason just to do those things in the first place. Of course, sounds like you did it more than I did.
Yeah, I think the first step here is acknowledging what's going on. Yeah. You know, okay, this is the situation. I'm uncomfortable in the water. Okay.
Yeah.
Check. Let's come up with a plan of action now. But yeah, going into BUD/S, I remember we graduated May 24, 2002 from the Naval Academy, and my report date at Naval Special Warfare Training Command, BUD/S, is late June 2002. So I had about a month off. We got to choose, of the 16 of us, who we're going to go to BUD/S with and in what order. And it was split over 3 classes. And I was in the group that was going to go first. And so we weren't going to have the stories from, and I thought this is actually probably good. I was happy with the first off the deck because we're not going to see Naval Academy classmates who are further along, who maybe can give some wisdom, but they're also through various stages, and I'd rather just be the first one to go. And so that worked out well.
There's a definite, like, the Naval Academy guys usually do well at BUD/S, and if they quit, they're just like hated by everyone because they took a billet. They took one of those 16 billets, and everyone just can't believe that you got this opportunity and freaking blew it. Like, I mean, the enlisted guys, like, I didn't care. I mean, when I was an enlisted guy going through BUD/S, I didn't care if somebody would quit for whatever reason. I was like, oh, whatever. But Naval Academy guys, they take that shit real personal.
There's some pressure, but I also think that can be an advantage. I went out to Coronado. So there's going to be 6, 5, and 5 in those 3 groups. So I'm going to be going with 6, 5 other classmates from the Naval Academy. We were packed into an apartment in Imperial Beach, 3 bedrooms, 2 to a room, like $200 per person a month for rent. And there was no way I could come back to that apartment having quit. No way. How could I do that? So you're putting yourself in a situation.
Did any of your 16 quit?
One. Damn. Not in my group.
Yeah.
But you're putting yourself in a situation where external factors, peer relationships, this kind of thing can actually, although it could be conceived or construed as adding pressure, I think it actually made me, at these kind of you're at your breaking point moments, this was maybe just a subliminal nudge in the direction of do not succumb, do not quit, push through, let's go.
I was like so detached from people quitting. I didn't even understand what was happening. Like, people were just quitting. I was like, I was saying this the other day, like, they didn't seem like human to me. Like, they didn't seem like a human. Like, oh, this guy. I didn't picture a person with like hopes and dreams, and I can't believe they just did that, and they joined the Navy, and now they're quitting. Like, oh gosh, what? I was just like, oh, this person's just a non-human thing that just like is moving on, and they're not part of what we're doing. And so I can only name one guy that quit, and he was my boat crew leader, and he was my boat crew leader in Hell Week. But that's the only. Everyone else was just like gone. I just never even thought about him. Never even, and I never had thoughts like, oh, this guy's my friend. So I never even thought like that. I was like, oh, we're just doing this. Oh, what do you want us to climb those rocks? You want us to jump in the water, whatever. Like I was, like you said, oh, maybe. You mentioned real quick, I said, well, I didn't have to go through all that stuff in the Naval Academy. Like, yeah, maybe you're smarter. And I was like, no. In my mind, I was like, no, I was dumb. I was just like, oh, I'm going in the Navy. I want to be a SEAL. They tell me to do something, I'm going to do it. Like, that was my attitude. So, and it might have been beneficial. It seems like it was beneficial. But it also disconnected me from even really any recognition of how hard SEAL training is. Because to me, I was like, there was just two groups of people. Me and my buddies and everyone else, and we didn't know them, and they just went away, and then we were all going to the teams. And it was like, oh, we're going to the teams. So it was almost like this weird, like now when I hear some of the statistics and more about it, and that guys that went to the Naval Academy and guys that were freaking Division I swimmers and Division I wrestlers and Division I football players, and they all quit. And like that just didn't even. I just thought there were a bunch of guys that just didn't want to be here, and I do. So that was that. Kind of crazy.
Yeah, I remember someone giving me advice, or I collected along the way, 3 pieces of advice. Number 1, in Hell Week, eat like it's your job. Don't ever eat, no matter how tired you are, eat. Second was give 70% effort 100% of the time. Try not to have to ever give 100%, but a good 70% effort 100% of the time, sustainable. And then third was don't get close to anybody because you don't know if they're going to quit. I'm wondering if when your boat crew leader quit, if that affected you. I hear when it sounds like it didn't, but you hear stories about when an officer quits, 3 or 4 people go with that person.
Yeah, I forget my buddy Giff, who I went through Hell Week. He was on here the other day, and we were talking about it. He just said, like, he was laughing. He's like, you just looked at him like, all right, whatever, and we just like carried on. I was like, yeah, no factor. I was too crazy, I guess. I was too just weird, I guess, or crazy or something. Did you have any challenges during BUD/S? Like when you got to pool comp, how was that? Did you have any challenges with the 5.5 nautical mile swim or anything like that?
I think what I saw in BUD/S with my class was no matter how gifted a person was, there was probably going to be something at some point that was going to challenge them. And one of my classmates, this individual from the Naval Academy who I had known for 4 years at this point, was just a stud in BUD/S. And there was one day at the very end, for whatever reason, the obstacle course rope with the low wall, the one the high wall, you ascend the rope and then kind of roll over. The rope was wet, and he just had a really hard time. I hope I'm not. If he's listening, I'm not bringing up some bad memories. But
PTSD.
Yeah, for me, I actually did quite well in pool week. Maybe having gone to dive school really helped me.
Had to have
helped me, and I remember in dive school the first just feeling really uncomfortable breathing underwater. It just was weird, But by the time second phase, dive phase of BUD/S comes around, that was normal. The double hose regulator was new because we were using a single hose in dive school.
Dude.
Yeah, and the
Aqualung Aquamaster.
yeah. I was just, there was one evolution though, and it's life saving. I forget if that was pre or post Hell Week. I want to say it was pre Hell Week, but
I think it's pre.
We had some large instructors who had weight belts on, and
they bring it.
They bring it, and I failed the first time.
Did your world come crashing down?
Yeah, he was just taking me under, and the second time I failed, and it was like the third time. I'm thinking, I'm sitting on that wall, that line of shame. Yeah,
Ooh.
Where you failed, and now you have to. This is your chance. I'm thinking like, is this it? So I just really tried to focus on the procedure and trying to do it. And number one, like what I was failing was the fact that this instructor was underwater. So number one thing is keep this person's head above the water. I don't care if I'm drinking water, if I'm underwater the whole time, his head needs to be above the water the entire time. And I get to the wall and it was a pass. I was just like,
We'll take it. Yeah, and I hope I didn't come across like Buds was easy for me. Because, I mean, I failed to run. I failed to swim. I failed pool comp. And actually, here's the funny thing. For life-saving, I got so ready for life-saving, I was like hostile. I was like, oh, I'm gonna fight some dudes. And it was like that back then. I don't know if it was like that when you went through it. Sounds like it was. It was a fight. Like, you're gonna fight this person. And so I was super amped up for that. I went out, got first in line. And in pool comp, I failed pool comp on Friday. And over the weekend, me and my buddy, who's now an active duty Master Chief, he failed too. And we spent, I don't know how we did this. I don't know how this was legal. I don't know if it was legal. We spent the weekend in the dip tank with charged twin innies. I don't know how we got them. And we just freaking pool comped each other in 4 feet of water. Like, we're standing outside the dip tank. I'm in the dip tank. He's standing there just ripping my face. And we did that for the whole weekend. The whole weekend we did that. I got on Monday morning, I went in there. The instructor came down, and this instructor ended up being an admiral. But he came down, and as soon as I saw him coming down, I ripped off my own face mask and spit out my mouthpiece like, fucking bring it, dude. And sure enough, he was like, dude, this guy's obviously very confident. And he messed me up, but then he was just like, pass. So I kind of would go a little bit extra on some of these things. but I don't want to make it sound like it was easy for me, because like I said, in fact, I failed to run, I failed to swim. Not only that, I can promise you, I never won a run, I never won a swim, I never won an O course. I was like in the middle of everything, and that was about all I had too. Like, when I failed to run, it was because I tried to pace myself a little bit and failed. So my only way to pass a run was to run as hard as I possibly could the entire time.
100%.
Yeah, not 70%, 100%. No, it was 100%, 100%. That's how I had to do it to pass a run, to pass a swim, to pass everything. So your only big challenge, though, was life-saving.
Life-saving, but there was a moment in the beginning stages of Hell Week where, and I can tell the story, I was at a decision point. At I would say my breaking point. And a lot of this was because of frustration.
Oh, dude, they're going to get you somehow.
Frustration with physical pain can be a really potent combination. And Hell Week, starts on a Sunday. It's going to end Friday. You're going to not sleep once until sometime on Wednesday. All these thoughts are kind of going through my head. 70% of my class, 80% are going to quit, not going to make it. Am I going to be one of the ones who gets through? All these looking around. You're in an isolation room waiting for this thing to start. Just all these thoughts going through your head.
You know what I was thinking at that time? Just like, when's this going to start? I want pizza. So you're having all these advanced thoughts, dude. I'm having like just nothing. I'm like a freaking idiot.
I'm thinking all this stuff, and who knows who's going to quit? Don't get close to anybody. And we break out, and it's just chaos. And form up the longest mile. You go all the way down with the boats on your head to the bottom end of the Silver Strand, racing. You're tired. It's not comfortable by any means, but at this point, it's like I'm in this. I mean, you're in it. You're in it. And so all that anxiety and buildup and apprehension has kind of dissipated because I'm just in this now. We're forming up for the second race, this part of the longest mile, with the logs. Logs are, the sectioned telephone poles, and my team steps up to a government pickup truck, receiving our log, and this thing was just insanely heavy. I don't know what was going on with it. It wasn't Old Misery.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what was going on. It felt like it was waterlogged.
Yep, it probably could have been waterlogged.
And maybe the instructors knew, maybe they didn't. I don't know. They knew. And I just remember we had one of the guys in the boat, and I guarantee you every single person under that log remembers this log. It was just so heavy. I mean, and you know what a log is supposed to weigh. You've done this stuff before, and immediately groaned. And there was a guy on the boat team who'd been through I think 3 days of Hell Week before, and 2 years before, gone to the fleet, come back, and immediately was saying, this log is a career ender. Just and I'm like, this is not good. So we received the brief, log carry north, bust them, go. The race is on. And just all the teams in the class were just out of sight. You couldn't hear or see the second to last place team even. This is bad.
So you guys are so far behind the second
back
to last place team.
Can't even see the second to last place team. I mean, the whole class is just gone, and we are all by ourselves at the last place. So of course the instructors descended upon us like a pack of wolves, with their megaphones and hurry up, step it out, move it out, let's go. And then there was this instructor in my face, and this person had a unique ability to really get under my nerves. And he's telling me he's going to kick me out of the program. We need to step it out. I'm at the far left end of the log.
Are you the boat crew leader?
Yes. Far left end of the log, where the weight tends to collect. And the person to my right, it just 10, 15, 20 minutes into this race. I have no conception of time, but we're into this race now. We're in last place, and it seemed like his arms, there just wasn't much. So you can feel the increase of the weight. And I'm at the far left end of the log, so it felt like I was carrying 2 people's worth of weight on the far left end of this log that was so heavy. I mean, it literally felt like my arms were going to just rip out of the shoulder sockets. My biceps were totally on fire. I mean, every step was just horrendous. And I started just succumbing to self-doubt, frustration, thinking long-term thought, like, how am I going to, I'm just a few hours into Hell Week, how am I going to make it, like, to Friday? Friday seems impossibly far away, and this log is destroying my body. This is not good. It's not good. I worked years to get to this point, and things are just unraveling fast. This is not a good start to Hell Week. We're only a few hours in, middle of the night. And there was this moment where I remember looking up into the sky as we're struggling to advance this log forward through the soft sand in last place, and just thinking, I can't do this. Is just too much. And I was frustrated because these instructors, and they don't, I just wanted to scream that this isn't fair. This log is not the right kind of weight. It's not a fair race. But I couldn't say that. And they didn't know or let on to their knowledge that this log was too heavy. So at this critical point where I just out of frustration, I was just about to walk away. I remember I just had this idea of like playing this game, and it's all in my mind, but I could quit, but first, take a few more steps. I take those steps, but then, okay, just keep playing this game, okay? Take a few more steps. Okay, I've done that. Let's just keep playing this game. And so I just got in that rhythm, and then I start, yelling some encouragement to the team, and let's go, let's go, let's go. And they probably wanted me to shut up. But this game, I learned a lesson. Like, okay, you gotta, when you have these situations that push you to your limit, you may have long-term goals. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL and all that, but it seemed like really far away. And as I think about this and unpack this experience, what I have learned is that a way to get your mind away from these long-term thoughts that can only be discouraging is to just focus on mechanics and procedure and process, support the log with my arms, advance it with my team one step at a time. That's all I need to be thinking about, right? And just, you learn that. I learned that in that night, right then and there in that race. And yeah, of course we finished last place and we got hammered, but because, it pays to be a winner, and they want to drive home this lesson that losing in combat has severe consequences. You need to find ways to win. There was no way in hell we were going to win under this log, but that punishment occurred. The log was away. We were just, doing air squats or bear crawl, whatever it was better than being under that log. And I knew that I just got through that. There was nothing this week that can be that bad. And nothing was that bad. And I remember laying in the surf zone, surf torture sessions. All I would need to do was just think, man, this is rest. At least I'm not under that log. My whole perspective had changed. I got through it. I learned that lesson. Just focus on one step at a time and advancing it in one. But this, I think every person who gets through Hell Week at some form, whether they process this consciously or not, but you have to break down long-term massive challenges into increments, things that you can do right now that add up over time to get through a very difficult situation. That lesson was very valuable for me.
No, that's a good one. And like I said, from my perspective, it was just like, I never even was thinking that far in advance. I was like, what, carry this log? Cool, got it. You know, I was too much of a knuckle dragger to process these kind of big picture strategic thoughts about my life.
Yeah, you know, maybe I'm prone to overthinking, and so there is something to be said for just doing it and not think, you know, just do what you got to do.
You know, I remember thinking when I was in Hell Week, I was like, oh, it's going to feel so good to go to sleep. Like, it was almost like my anticipation. I was like, oh, it's going to feel so cool to stay awake for so long, because imagine how good it's going to feel to fall asleep when in a week. That's going to be so cool. It's going to feel so good to just like lay down. And I was kind of excited about the prospect of having stayed awake for so long, but then I got to go to sleep. And the only way you can get to get that much pleasure in sleeping is to stay awake for that long. Otherwise, it's just kind of a pain to go to sleep. It's like a waste of time. It feels like it's like bad. So thankfully, you made it through. How many people started in your buds class? Do you remember?
Oh, we had, when we classed up, I believe it was 196. That number sticks in my mind. It seems like a pretty
and what class
number.
Were you?
I was class 242. So June of 2002, we classed up. Hell Week was late August 2002, summer Hell Week. So the surf torture sessions weren't that bad. They just leave you in longer. But again, it's just rest.
They adjust,
And I believe we graduated 26 original, but we had rollbacks along the way.
Yeah. You get done. So those were your major challenges. A little bit of life saving.
2 big challenges. Yeah.
You get done, and you get assigned to a team. What team you end up going to?
West Coast team, Team 1.
So you end up going to Team 1. Did you want to go to the West Coast?
Yeah, I chose that.
You had that Coronado on your mind.
Yeah, you know, being from Kansas, I'd been East Coast at the Naval Academy, and you know, the thing is, when you get to a team, nobody cares that you went through Hell Week.
Yep.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares that you haven't tried it. These things I've been working for years, they no longer matter.
Did you get your Trident after SQT?
Yes.
So
September 2003, I reported that West Coast team in October 2003 as a new guy.
So you show up and you get put right into a platoon?
No. The policy at that team at that time was, and the detailing was a little off in the sense that they were just a few months away and ended up doing a surge deployment. So the team had to do a surge deployment to Iraq. I think, I kind of forget the particulars, but maybe more platoons were needed.
Was this in 04?
Yes.
And you were at Team 1?
Yes.
And you went on deployment?
Yes. Less than 4 months after arriving.
You went on deployment in the what time of year?
January 04, I believe there was some kind of a surge happening within the community.
Check.
And so I got to that team. They were already well through their workup. And so the policy, there were several of us junior officers who were just kind of floating around. And the policy was not to put the third officer in a platoon at that team at that time.
So did you go on deployment?
Yeah, I did.
Where'd you
I
go?
deployed to the Pacific.
Okay.
And got to do
I
some
was
extra-
at Team 7. And
Yep.
Team 1 relieved us. So that's why.
Yep.
So if you would have gone to Iraq, you would have high-fived with me in Iraq
Yeah.
as I was getting ready to head home.
I was not in that group. I was bummed. You know, when you think at the Naval Academy that you've now been selected to go to BUDS, 9/11 just happened. This is for real. We're going to war. You go through BUDS, Hell Week, etc., land warfare, everything, SQT. You get to a team. You're deploying to war. I did not realize that some platoons deploy to non-combat environments even when there is combat going on, and that was a surprise to me. Not exactly what I expected, but I'm a new guy, and so you go where you're told. And a lot of people may not realize this, but platoons don't often get to control where they deploy, or even the commanding officer of the team doesn't get to control that.
There's a strong element of chance in all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why the best thing you can do is get to a team, do a good job, do the best you can, keep going on deployment, and hopefully get in the right place at the right time. The better you do, the better reputation you have, the better chance you will have, but it's still only a chance. So did you do a full 6 months in the Pacific?
It was 9 months.
Oh, dang.
9 months in the Pacific, staged out of Guam, doing a lot of exercises with various countries. I mean, we got to do some cool training, which for me was actually new training, especially in terms of urban combat and movement through houses and amongst structures. So that was something I hadn't been exposed to because I hadn't done the workup. So getting to do that with a platoon, with simunition and this kind of thing was really good training, I thought.
So you get done with that deployment. Now you get put as an assistant platoon
Correct.
commander?
Yes.
So you're still at Team 1?
Yeah, so this is now 2004, going to be deploying 2005. Assistant platoon commander, same team.
And how's this?
Yep, assistant platoon commander. I'm still a new guy. You know, you're in this position as a junior officer, in my situation, not being prior enlisted like you were, that you're, in terms of not only age, but experience in the teams, you're just outranked, even though maybe technically on the uniform, there's a rank. So it's a difficult position to navigate sometimes. I think you want to go into this with some humility, with asking questions. I found that junior officers in the team sometimes, and I think I can put myself in this category, try to cover up some of their insecurities, not knowing things, not having the experience by acting as if they do know.
Yeah, which is a big mistake.
That's in retrospect, you can see, you know that people can see through this, but at the time you don't necessarily realize that. And so maybe you're reluctant to ask advice or ask someone's opinion, but I actually learned that this is a wonderful opportunity to show someone that you value their opinion. You ask, hey, in the locker room where the cages are, how are you setting up your kit? Just pick their brain. And I mean, I think this is a good thing for anybody in any organization when you're new, is just ask the people who know what's going on. What do you recommend? And this creates a sense of buy-in. I think the fact that you value their opinion, that's useful. So I tried to approach it from a position of humility, but as an assistant platoon commander, your primary responsibilities are to learn tactics, learn small unit leadership, and then do administrative functions for the platoon and support the platoon commander.
Yeah, and I mean, even though I was a prior enlisted guy, I mean, I still would ask the team, like the guys, hey, how do you think we should do this? What do you think we should do? Where should we insert? What do you think about this platform over here? I would always do that, even when I was the more experienced and sometimes even the most experienced. And I learned that from one of my platoon commanders, who was a prior enlisted guy who had more experience than any of us, who asked us, hey, what do you think? How do you think we should do this? And that's, I got to just steal his leadership techniques for when I was put in charge. But I always give that advice, if there's no sense in acting like you know what you're doing, because everybody, not only do they see through it, but they don't expect you to know everything. They're like, hey, you've been here for 3 months, bro. We don't expect you to know how to run this drill or how to plan for this mission. It's okay. We do, and we can all work together to figure this out. Any standout memories from that workup, getting ready to deploy?
My memories are of the people, and in particular 2 who are no longer here, and that's just something that I'll always take away from that platoon. One was killed in the extortion helicopter crash, and another on an operation a few years ago. So that's tough. I really just, I think about those guys a lot. I would say one of my leadership failures in this phase was along the lines of being in that position of, you're younger, you don't have as much experience, you're falling into wanting to be one of the guys, one of buddies, and I would say, this is probably something that everybody deals with in the junior officer ranks of the teams. You want to be liked, you want to be